Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Soul Chess in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 21, Lelich's Zero once more. Lelich's POV. It's been 5 years since I first became a member of Division 6. The progress for my plan to get Hisuna and Byakuya together has been, well, stagnant. The fact that she's in Aizen's division makes things difficult enough as it is. Every time she's here in my division, I've been out or unable to talk to her other than a simple greeting. Every time I go to her division to actually see her because I have paperwork, she's flooded with work, and the few times I actually have made the courageous effort to brave enemy territory, her direct subordinate has told me that Hisuna is out for the day, having gone to Inzuri. I don't know what she's doing visiting her roots. To be honest, I'd like to know, but I have not been able to get a hold of her. 2 years ago, Ashine Fukotaiko became Ashine Taiko. He's now captain of 10th Division. He didn't ask me to come back, I wouldn't have accepted anyway. I will never go back to the 10th Division, not after what happened. I'll always be reminded of Yuna and Akari Taiko. That's a little excessive. Don't interrupt me. 4 years ago I geased my direct subordinate and sent him with a message to indicate that I had no interest in joining him. Good thing I did, or I would have been the one skewered and had my death covered up to make it seem like I was a traitor. The poor bastard had no idea I anticipated Aizen's moves. Iin Tamashi was pleased that I was so meticulous. Speaking of my Zanpakuto, last year I finally mastered my Shikai's last technique. Iin Tamashi taught it to me as a reward for not caring about the welfare of my direct subordinate in the interest of self-preservation. The technique is called Warusa Bakuden, Viral Bomb. To activate it, I launch a toxic purple blast of energy at my opponent. When it dies, or after a certain time limit, anywhere between 1 and 3 minutes, of which I have complete control of the time setting now, the body explodes with half the force of a Jillian's Zero. My ability to teleport makes it possible so that I can get away right as the blast goes off if I would be caught within it. I've asked Iin Tamashi about the potential of teaching me Bankai, but she says I'm not ready. She wants me to absolutely wow her, to do something extraordinary before she starts teaching me a new level of abilities. She also said I need to get stronger and more versatile. My stamina is no longer in the toilet, thankfully, but it's nowhere near close to Suzaku's. My Hakuda and Kendo abilities are about average. I've gotten better at Shunpo, but it drains me rather quickly. 12 long-distance flash steps is my limit before I start to get fatigued. My Kido is nearly impeccable. There's a reason I wear the silver vest that I do. In secret I've been practicing the rarely mastered Heido 90 and Heido 91. I've already fully mastered Heido 88, and showing it to Kukaki Taiko got me promoted to 9th seat. As a member of the 6th Division, and Byakuya Fukotaiko's former mentor, I'm in with the family. I'm considered important, I'm invited to parties. I regard Byakuya Fukotaiko, when addressing the other nobles, as a perfectly good case of the student surpassing the master. Most of the times I'm dealing with them, when I'm invited to some formal occasion, are kind of boring. Other times I'm normally taking a mental tally of how many times Byakuya Fukotaiko and I are hit on by the noble women and seeing which one of us has the higher total by the end of the evening. It constantly becomes a pain. I find senseless infatuation appalling. There's no emotion there. I'm potentially interested in companionship, not a one-night stand. That's part of the reason why I haven't taken Rangiku up on her last 2 offers. Every time I start thinking about deep emotions, my mind always finds some way to go back to Yuna. I regret not telling her how I felt. I pushed her away and now she's gone. And to make things worse, I wouldn't have to have hid my investigation into Aizen. She already knew about it. I keep Yuna's diary and the picture of us locked away in my safe. I've thought about presenting her diary to the Central 46 as evidence, but knowing them they'd reject her accusations because there was no evidence to support her written words, just Hashima's mask, and I don't have any evidence that ties Aizen to the incident with Urahara-san. If anything, they'd write of Yuna, and me, as being allies to a traitor, and have me thrown in the maggot's nest. One interesting thing did come up in all of Yuna's files regarding how much she investigated Aizen. She had information on one of my leads. Said lead being the incident involving Taiko's fallen friend. She had cutouts of the newspaper article attached to some of her files. However, All she has is that Tasenteiko's friend's killer was let go by Central 46 due to temporary insanity. The problem is that Tasenteiko neglected to mention his friend's name in the article, and Yuna only managed to get one word to give me a lead into the incident: Kozu. It was a surname of that much I could be clear of. However, without regular access to a database of some kind, my investigation is considerably stunted in progress. This would be so much easier if I was still in 12th Division. Well, you're not, so get over it. I ignored Iin Tamashi. Hey. Currently I've been investigating into the events surrounding Kukaki Sojun's death. I have reason to believe that Hashima was responsible for assimilating the hollows that attacked him and his men. However, without having the ability to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Hashima was involved and being able to link him to Aizen, I can't do much of anything except continue to investigate. I also have been hearing a lot lately about the head of one of the noble houses beneath the Kukaki family, Isilba Ejur of the Isil clan. Apparently the eldest Isil has been giving Kukaki Teiko flack in the council. He's been a dissenting party in nearly every matter brought up lately, and he's also been pushing for Byakuya to marry his granddaughter, Isil Sabrina. He's even forced her and Byakuya Fukutaiko on 3 dates already. I've seen her and met her before. Byakuya asked for my opinion about her. I was honest. I seriously think you could do better. I had told him. Sabrina wasn't unattractive by any means, but only because of how she prepped herself. Even Akari Teiko never wore as much makeup as Sabrina does. Without makeup or a fancy dress she'd be nothing. Both Cornelia and Euphemia had her beat in the looks department, even if Cornelia were in uniform. In fact, as long as I'm being honest, Colin has Sabrina beat in appearance. Just because you're blonde doesn't automatically make you attractive. Of course looks aren't everything, but if I had to sum Sabrina in less than 30 words, I'd consider her an over-territorial, prissy, loquacious, bombastic, overly dramatic, bimbo with a voice so sweet and innocent you kind of want to throw up in your own mouth. She's also seriously lacking in basic intelligence. She and Byakuya are a horrible match for each other. Byakuya told me he agreed with me, and was just hoping he wasn't alone in that opinion when he asked me for mine. I've thought about doing some serious investigation into potentially discovering some dirty laundry the Isils have neglected to wash, but Byakuya Fukutaiko has told me that, while he would love to grant me a search warrant or act as a distraction, he won't act without probable cause. He's also told me that acting alone would ruin me if I was caught, and I haven't exactly come up with a flawless plan to do a serious hands-on investigation into the Isil manor. Right now, besides Byakuya Fukutaiko, there are only 2 people in my squad I consider myself somewhat close to. The first is my former student turned equal that is now my direct subordinate, 10th seed Shapani Susanna. I remember when she first saw me walking around the division grounds. 5 years ago. Sensei. There were a handful of people that ever called me by that title. I turned to see a tall woman with silver hair and red eyes racing towards me. Lelich Sensei, it is you, isn't it? In my time in the Godai there was only one female I knew that had silver hair and red eyes. Oh, Susanna, how are you? I'm great. I'm a 10th seed of the 6th division. What are you doing here? I thought you were in 10th division with Homura Teiko. Well, actually. Present day. I told Susanna about my transfer out. She was excited that I was in her division, and especially excited when I became her direct superior. Susanna always revered me much like Byakuya Fukutaiko used to. He still holds me in high regard, but ever since he grew up he doesn't hold me in that childish high-esteemed idolization like he did. Susanna still does though. I can't for the life of me understand why, given that she has had her rank longer than I have when we were equals. Clueless. Will you shut up? No. I growled. Iin Tamashi snickered. The other person I get along with really well in the division is my direct superior, 8th seed Keshiba Ryu. He's a blue-haired, somewhat laid-back individual, but he takes his work seriously, unlike quite a few people I could mention. He's very adhesive to the law, much like Byakuya Fukutaiko, and especially like Suzaku. However, unlike both of them, he understands that some people will break the law to achieve noble goals. While he openly states he wouldn't want to be caught dead in that sort of situation, he doesn't exactly consider a criminal with good intentions scum like Byakuya Fukutaiko or Suzaku would. With a little persuasion he could prove useful to me. While I'm on the topic of useful subjects, I've been thinking about starting a GoDI-sponsored organization. We would be a game club, mostly chess, but there'd be others. However, that would just be a front to masquerade my organization's true purpose. My organization would allow me a way to converse with all the people who revere and respect me. I would form a new organization, like I did with the Black Knights, and I would dedicate our efforts to uncovering the conspiracies of the Soul Society. There are only two problems. The first problem is that in order to start an organization, the founder and club president must both be at least fifth seats in the GoDI 13. I'm not a fifth seat, nor do I have someone I can trust indefinitely that I could elect club president to watch over the actual club, while I work with my operatives behind the scenes. The second problem is I have no idea where I would get the proper funding for the club that could also fund my behind-the-scenes business and not ask questions. As I sit here, contemplating all of this, I receive a knock on my door. Strange, I'm not expecting anyone today, I thought to myself. Come in. To my surprise, Hisina opened the door. My subordinate told me you've been trying to get a hold of my Lelich. And here I thought today would be boring. I have actually. Do you have time for a social call? I asked. Of course. Hisina told me. She closed the door. Have a seat then, make yourself comfortable. I told her. She did so. Say Hisina, you like Byakuya Fukotaiko, right? Hisina blushed. Why are you coming out and talking about that all of a sudden? She looked like I had just made her short of breath. Well, here's the thing, I don't know if you're aware, but one of the lower noble families has been pushing for Byakuya to marry his granddaughter. I'm going to be honest with you, she's a horrible match. You'd do a lot better. I told Hisina. But, I am not a noble, Byakuya Dano isn't allowed to marry me. Hisina was redder in the face than Colin's hair. True, he's not head of the house, so he can't make his own rules, but I can be very silver-tongued. You try and get Byakuya to reciprocate your feelings, and I'll do what I can to convince my captain to let this slip under the radar. I told Hisina. You seem very self-assured the head of the most famous noble house will listen to an individual of lesser rank, especially since you're not from a noble family. Does it matter my confidence level so long as you're allowed what you want? I asked Hisina. She immediately dropped the argument. But what should I do then? I'm a high rank, so I always have a lot of work, not to mention my captain seems to enjoy loading me with paperwork for every division except this one more times often than not. And the times he does normally I don't have the time to be paying social visits with friends once I'm done. I just happened to catch a break today. Hisina responded. She seemed really ticked off Aizen. I wondered what could potentially happen if I pressed. You're not fond of Captain Aizen? I asked innocently. Would you be fond of a superior who insisted on acting like you're a fragile piece of glass, despite the fact that you're full capable of taking care of yourself? I swear I feel like a prisoner in my own division sometimes. I'd tell him where to go, but he's my captain. Hisina fumed. She took a deep breath and then tucked the segment of hair dangling down the bridge of her nose to one side. Sorry, that was unprofessional. No worries, you're the superior officer here. I told her. It sounds like a certain 5th Division captain is after a trophy wife. Hisina's certainly not bad looking. Aizen's not a fool to target her. Too bad he's on the wrong side of a love triangle. Hisina's displeasure with her captain definitely works to my advantage. Say Hisina, if you're so unhappy with your position, why not transfer here? I asked. Newsflash Lelich, she said, Kukaki Teiko doesn't have any 5th seat or higher position openings. On top of that, Aizen Teiko would never consent to letting me getting a transfer. He thinks the other captains would be too tough on me. In his own words, what have I done to make you unhappy here Hisina, tell me and I'll fix it, I had to admit that Hisina did a sound impression of the man. The problem is he's done nothing wrong and that's what irritates me so much. What about Jin? I asked. He was your classmate. Surely he'd do something for you. Ugh, Ichimaru Fukotaiko is such self-centered prick. He's also Aizen Teiko's pet practically. Hisuna complained. I thought of the perfect plan to get things to go how I wanted. Hisuna, why don't you leave all these obstacles in my hands and I'll see what I can't do about getting you here? I told her. Huh. Hisuna was confused. Having you here would be an inexpressible pleasure to me. I'd have 3 of my 4-star pupils in one squad. I told Hisuna. Just what would you do to make that happen? Hisuna asked me. It's best if you don't know. Just put your faith in your former sensei. I told Hisuna. She thought things over before saying, all right. I trust you, Lelouch. She told me. Wonderful. I smiled like I did the time I first used my geese. 5 days later. 10th Division. I know I said I would never go to the 10th Division, but I had to make an exception for my plan to work. Besides, I only needed to find one person in particular. I knocked on the office door marked for Matsumoto Rangiku. Come in. She called jubilantly. I walked in. Hi, Rangiku. Oh, Lelouch. Hi. How are you? She asked. I'm fine, I told her. Listen, could come take a walk with me somewhere? I asked. Rangiku loves abandoning her work. She'll use any excuse to do it. Sure, where are we going? She asked, walking over to me. I winked. That's a secret. I led Rangiku to an abandoned cabin, deep within the forest within the Siridi. It was where Urahara Kisuke had once taken out a bunch of thugs when he was still in charge of the detention unit. The place was completely abandoned, but the structure was still intact. I led Rangiku inside, making sure she went in first. The inside was completely barren save for some items I had stored beneath a storage space hidden underneath the floorboards. Things were perfect. What are we doing here? Rangiku asked. Rangiku, I told her as I removed one contact lens rather commandingly, turn around and look at me. She did, and I stared her right in the eye to use my geese. For the next 18 hours you will fall into a deep sleep of which you will not awaken. You will not remember seeing me today. I had made sure we hadn't been spotted on the way over here. You will believe you were kidnapped, and the person who tells you they rescued you will have indeed rescued you from your kidnapper. You will also obey any of commands directly spoken to you if you hear the words, Rangiku Matsumoto, I, command you. Within that 18-hour period. I, Lelouch 6 Britannia, command you. Obey my instructions. I used my geese on Rangiku and she obeyed my commands. I removed a chair, some rope, and a blindfold from the storage space. I then bound Rangiku to the chair with some rope, of which I set some explosives around the chair that I had arranged to look as if they were the property of the 12th Division's 6th seat that was still under the influence of my geese to send Eisen paperwork. My plan today would have everything pinned on him. I then grabbed a replica of my Zero helmet that I had managed to craft when I was in 12th Division. Of course, cheap knockoffs of these helmets were available in Siridi and Rukonga shops alike. I then put on a Ryotsu masking cloak and sent out a hell butterfly to one Jin Ichimaru. I told him the following: I have kidnapped Matsumoto Rangiku. If you want her back, come and find me, and then proceeded to give him the exact location. I spent the time it would take for him to arrive on the scene preparing my escape. Once Jin got Rangiku back, he would attempt to both unmask and kill me. Once my escape route was prepared, Jin showed up right on schedule 2.5 minutes later. By then I was already in place. Rangiku was holding the detonator to the explosives at my request, and she was holding it right in front of her chest. If Jin tried to knock the remote out of her hand, he had a very likely chance of hitting her as well, or instead. When he burst through the door, I was standing right in the light of the doorway. Rangiku was hidden by the left side of my cloak flung out at my side. Well. I was beginning to think you wouldn't show Ichimaru, Jin. I spoke. Where is she? Jin was really pissed. Right here. I told Jin. He saw the explosives. Alright, you mask-wearing bastard, what do ya want? Jin asked. What do I want? That's simple. In exchange for Rangiku you will draft, right here, a transfer document for your 5th seat Sayuri Hisuna. I told him, holding up a transfer document. And just how is Sayuri Hisuna your concern? Jin asked. I see. You don't know who you're dealing with, do you? I am the defender of the weak, persecutor of the strong. I am the hero of justice. I am the great vigilante aid to those in need. Knowledge is my most potent weapon. I flung my cloak out to one side. Preparation is my most loyal ally. I am Zero. You. Jin's eyes flung open. I smirked as I confirmed that Zero had been mentioned in the reports of having broken Urahara-san and the others out of prison. Things were going exactly according to plan. Jin shut his eyes. This must be my lucky day. Jin drew out his Zanpakuto. I'll wipe you off the face of the Soul Society. Aizen Teiko will surely be pleased with me getting rid of a pest like you. That would be ill-advised. I said and flung out the other side of my robe, revealing that I was wearing explosives around my own chest. You shoot me and we all go to the great beyond. You're insane. And coming from me that's saying something. Jin smirked. It's like I always say, the only ones who should kill are those willing to be killed. Now do as I ask and let me go free, and your precious cargo won't have to suffer even a hair's breadth of damage. I enforced. Oh, and just to make sure those papers are processed, I have your friend here under my power until you do. So I suggest you have them sent through the moment you have the chance. Fail to do so and I could just as easily have her attack you. Jin was mad, but he wasn't a fool. I managed to get him to comply. When I had what I needed, I looked over Jin's shoulder to scan the document to make sure Jin wasn't going to pull a fast one on me, and then grabbed Rainjiku. When I am certain you have done as I asked, you can have this back. I disappeared with her and followed Jin with Bakudo 58, Kakushitsujaku. When I was certain that he was near finished with processing the document, I left Rainjiku, untied and unbound, in a remote area and told Jin where he could find her. I then stored the cloak and helmet inside a hyperspace capsule and then executed phase 2 of my plan. I went back to my division and waltzed into the office of my division's 5th seat, Kisra Raiden. I made sure to keep my left eye hidden from his line of sight, since I hadn't yet replaced my contact lens. I had left it out to ensure Jin's cooperation if we got into a tussle. Oh, good afternoon Lelich, he said to me, something I can help you with? Actually there is, I said. I closed the door and then looked Kisra-senpai in the eye. Write a suicide note describing how you are overcome with grief and then kill yourself. I ordered. He did as I asked. As the blood dripped everywhere and I felt the life force drain from him, I calmly left the office and went for Kukaki Teiko's office. I decided, acting slightly panicked, but not overly distraught, would be believable that I was acting genuinely surprised about having waltzed in to find Kisra-senpai's dead body. Kukaki Teiko. I knocked on the office door. What's all that banging? I heard him get up from his desk and walk over to where I was to open the door. Lelich? What's wrong? Kisra-senpai committed suicide. I blurted out. This better not be one of your sick jokes. Kukaki Teiko sighed. I tell one joke in incredibly ill taste and suddenly he marks me as sick. Wonderful. It was kind of a sick joke, Lelich. It just goes to show not everyone has a decent sense of humor. I led Kukaki Teiko to Kisra-senpai's office. Kukaki Teiko was even more stoic than Byakuya Fukutaiko had grown to be. It's always the joyous ones that you miss. He didn't say anything for about half a minute before calling to me. Lelich. Yes. Go and get my grandson. He ordered calmly. Yes, sir. I obeyed. Like a charm. Things processed exactly as planned. 12th Division's 6th seat, Dinrei Ichiro, was blamed for all of Zero's actions and executed as Zero. Boy, would the Central 46 regret that decision the next time I disguised myself as Zero and declared that they had killed an innocent man. And to make matters more interesting, I had managed to pull Aizen's eyes away from me. Jin would no doubt report that someone was onto him, but he'd have Aizen chasing after a phantom rather than going after me. Unlike Aizen's investigation into Zero, my investigation into him would actually go somewhere. Hisano was given a transferal out of 5th Division and into 6th. I personally helped her get settled on her first day. Lelich, I don't know how you did it, she said, I'm in Byakuya Dano's squad. Her zest over being in Byakuya's squad was all the positive reinforcement I needed to know that I had done something incredible. Hey, I'm just happy to help an old friend. I told her. If there's anything you need from me, just feel free to ask. You're my commanding officer now. Haha, that'll take some getting used to since I used to be your student. She chuckled as she began unpacking a box. How mad was Aizen Taiko when he found out you were transferring? I asked as I continued stalking her bookshelf. To be perfectly, brutally honest Lelouch, the madder he is the happier I am. Hisuna snickered. She then sighed as she stalked one of her desk drawers. Unfortunately, I don't think I've fully shaken him off. Why do you say that? I asked as I came down off the stepladder. That man is a stalker. Hisuna griped. You would not believe how many times he asked me to reconsider my transferal. Someone's not used to being told no, it seems. I laughed. Now all we have to do is get you into Byakuya Fukotaiko's bed and objective completed. Lelouch. Hisuna flushed. I just laughed to myself. Another victory for the Magnificent Zero. Iin Tamashi was acting like she was a sports announcer. Hero of Justice, 2. Captain Aizen, 0. For once we agree on something. I responded. Everything, this time anyway, seemed to go, dare I say it? Go ahead. All right. I mentally cleared my throat. Everything went, just as planned. To be continued. Chapter 22, Lelouch's Big Break. Lelouch's POV. It's been a little over a year since I got Hisuna a transferal into the 6th Division. I've also had some time to do some thinking. To further my own goals I had Kisra kill himself. I thought about other means and methods before resorting to that, such as getting him a transferal, but to do so requires incentive from higher up, captain and vice captain level only. I need to save my geese for Kukaki Taiko in case Byakuya Fukotaiko fails to persuade him on his own to allow Hisuna to marry Byakuya Fukotaiko. Taking a mistress is a much easier alternative, but I always imagine a catfight breaking out between Byakuya Fukotaiko's future wife and Hisuna being the one thrown to the wayside. I'd never let that happen to a pupil of mine. I thought about geasing Byakuya Fukotaiko to get the transferal, but I'm not too keen on geasing the future head of the Kukaki house over something this minor. If my investigation into the Isles winds up turning up some shady business, but Byakuya Fukotaiko brushes it off, I might have to persuade him. He'd thank me for it later. I thought about the potential of making Kisra insane or having him go and make a scene, dragging himself into the center of the Siriti and causing mass hysteria before being dragged away to the maggot's nest, but that's a fate worse than death. The people in there sit in that cage rotting until they wither. There's nothing I can do about that, and quite frankly I don't think many of those cases were investigated as well as they should have been, not since Urahara-san lost the position anyhow. Urahara-san was a man of proper caliber for that job, and his friendship with Yoriyuki made sure that there wasn't any lack of thought put into his lockups. However, we, as a whole in the Soul Society, are afterlife spirits. Kisra was a loner, no past to speak of, no friends in Rokanga and no lost loves or anything of the sort. If anything, I granted him another chance at life. Part of me regrets not allowing him to see the future I would usher into the Soul Society, but part of me believes I've done a good thing. Kisra said he always wanted to be an innkeeper, but his parents insisted he become a soldier instead. Hopefully, wherever he is, in 20 to 30 years he'll have a shot at his dream. They say when you're reincarnated that your memory is wiped and you're given a clean slate. However, I believe that there are fragments left over buried deep within your soul that cannot be lost. Or rather, I hope so. I could be reincarnated again and again and I would still fall in love with you. I just want you to know that when I become a Soul Reaper again, even though I will no longer remember you, I will find you. I will find you because, Lelouch, I love you. Right now I'm taking care of some extra paperwork for Hisuna while she goes scouring into Inzuri. I don't know what she does out there. One of these days I'm going to ask, or perhaps follow her out there and pretend like I'm on a mission and we just happened to bump into each other. Of course finding her wouldn't be an issue at all. I'm very good at Ryotsu detection. Ryotsu detection, using and understanding hell butterflies, Kido, understanding complex algorithms, and tactics are all my specialties as a Soul Reaper. My Kendo, Shunpo, and Hakuda could definitely do with some Polish. To be quite honest, I don't think I'll ever become a master or expert at any of the three, except maybe Shunpo to make daring escapes, but of course I already can do that. I've often been requested by Susanna for sparring matches. She's trying to improve her Zanpakuto's power so she can improve in rank, and I know I could definitely use with some polish with my own skills. Through this I have learned that my close combat skills are very poor when compared to someone, like Susanna, who knows what they're doing. I understand basic theory and my body has been built up well enough over the years, but I simply don't have the battle-toned reflexes to match someone who has been a survivalist, like Susanna and Hisuna, or is naturally born with incredible skill, like Byakuya Fukutaiko. I know my fighting style and I'm quite good at it. I'd like to see any other 9th seats pull of a perfect Heido 88, without the chant, twice in a row, without getting tired. I'm still working out the bugs to pulling off Heido 90 properly. There is a serious power dissonance between a high-level 80 and a low-level 90. I had a very interesting discussion with Kukaki Teiko on the subject. He told me that the level 90 Hados are no small feat to achieve. I acted like I was speaking hypothetically when we spoke. He told me that the idea was ludicrous, that only the head captain, Anohana Teiko, and Urahara-san were the only Soul Reapers he could say ever mastered a level 90 Heido. He said being able to pull off Heido 88 should be considered an accomplishment. Well, what if, by some manner or another, I did manage to successfully pull of a level 90 Heido? I said. Lelich, if you could pull of a level 90 Heido, I'd start scouring the Go-Di for a higher placement for you. To call you a 9th seat at that point would be an insult. It's been about an hour since Hisuna left. Normally she spends 3 hours in Rukanga and then comes to pick up what I've completed for her. This is the 17th time since she's been here that she's gone out to Rukanga. She's told me that it's because of me that she can go so frequently. She said she used to take frequent trips when she was in 13th Division because Yukatake Teiko understood personal needs, but Aizen Teiko found it necessary to confine her within the Serai. Whatever she's doing out there, it seems more important to her than making a move on Byakuya Fukutaiko. She's made steady progress. Byakuya Fukutaiko even came to me once asking if I ever had feelings for a close personal friend that were more than friendship. I started by telling him I was flattered that he came to me for advice. Lelich, I came to you asking for advice because you've always helped me when I have no one else I believe I can turn to. If you're going to make light of the situation, I can try and handle this matter on my own. Sorry, I had apologized. What seems to be the trouble? Answer me question, have you ever had feelings for a close personal friend that were more than friendship? He had asked. 4 times. I had said as I held up the corresponding number of fingers. In each of those situations, what did you do? He had asked. 2 of them died on me without knowing how I felt. I had responded as I twirled a pencil between my hands. And the other 2? Byakuya Fukutaiko had asked. I was in a situation where a relationship was not an option. Also, I was a lot younger than you were. I had glanced away from my desk at this point over to where my Fukutaiko was standing. If my hunch is correct, and they usually are, you have the potential and desire to act on the situation, but given certain circumstances you don't know if you should. You feel if you do that others will disapprove and it might only serve to drive the one you like away. Byakuya Fukutaiko had nodded in response to this. Do you have any suggestions? Well, if it were me, first I'd make absolutely certain of my feelings for the person, then I would set things up to make the situation favorable so as not to cause a backlash from my peers. I would hold my head high and openly speak against those who would disapprove. I had told him. Byakuya Fukutaiko seemed to understand what I meant. I've seen him a couple of times openly inviting Hisuna places to spend time with her, not the least of which was the Kukaki Manor itself. I think he was working up the courage to confront Kukaki Teiko. Somehow I got the feeling that, when he did, I might be consulted to intervene on Kukaki Teiko's behalf. I was practically an honorary member of the Kuchikis considering my close connection with them over the last 6 years, plus my history with Byakuya Fukutaiko. If only I could get some form of leeway into one of my investigations, things would be so much easier if I could just punch a hole in one of my investigations. The door knocked, interrupting my thoughts. Come in. It was Susanna. Mail for you. She told me. Oh, thanks. I said, smiling at her. Lelich Dano. Susanna had recently come to refer to me as such. I was both her sensei, and now her senpai, and she wasn't sure if I would always be her superior in rank, so she outfitted me with such an honorific. I told her it wasn't necessary, since we worked so close, but she insisted, and who am I to deny such a harmless request from a lady? Something the matter, Susanna? I asked as she put my mail on my desk for me. Well, you know how next month on today's date that the GoDI is holding a special ceremony where all the captains are going to get up and make jokes at each other's expense, purely for entertainment purposes, and then there is a party afterwards. Susanna asked. Yes, the Sacred Captain Roasting, as it's been called. What about it? I asked. Well, there's a party afterwards with dancing and music and stuff, and I was wondering, would you? She averted my gaze with only her eyes, and her cheeks turned the same color as her eyes. Would you save a dance for me? What? Clueless. Iin Tamashi hummed. I growled at her. Oh, of course, if you don't want to, I understand. I was just, just wondering, is all. A party afterwards, perhaps I could use Susanna as more than a dance partner, especially since Hisuna and Byakuya Fukutaiko are both going to be there. Sure, Susanna. Actually, if you'd be willing to help me with something at the dance, I'd be willing to be more than just your dance partner. I said with a smile. It's times like these I'm glad I have this sort of effect on women. Yes, like a date. I told her. I watched a look of utter surprise creep into her face and her cheeks turn a deeper shade of red. Susanna bowed so forcefully that her hair went cascading over her face. Thank you. She ran out of my office squealing. I watched her out of my office window as she started jumping for joy out in the garden. Don't you think manipulating the poor girl is a bit cruel? She has suffered through a lot. Iin Tamashi was displeased with my actions. Who says I'm manipulating her? I just need her help is all. I told Iin Tamashi. And she'll take that as thinking that you like her. It's appalling to play with a woman's heart like that, Lelich. Iin Tamashi scolded. That's precisely why I'm being nice to her. Yuna gave her a chance to find happiness. It's not like she'll ever find out I was just using her, besides I need to start looking for recruits for my future organization, and Susanna's a prime candidate. I responded. Yes, the organization that will act as your Knights of Justice, under Zero's banner. So that wasn't just a random idea that popped into your head, you're really going to create an afterlife faction of the Black Knights? Iin Tamashi inquired. That's my intention. I told her. Keep this up and maybe something extraordinary might happen between us one of these days. Iin Tamashi said, and then terminated our connection. I sat back down and decided to go through my mail. It was when I received a letter from Miss Hinteiko that I was concerned. However, it turned out that the message itself was from Kyokaku, possibly hand-delivered to her cousin, or sent to him first and resent to me. Kyokaku, you are one sly woman. The message read as follows. CMTTHSHBMNRMMDTLY. VMPRTNTNWSFRY. Well, she did say she would send me messages in code. I thought to myself. Now let's see what you've concocted here, Miss Shiba. It took me a mere 10 minutes to figure out that Kyokaku had purposely left out all vowels in the words of her message. It didn't take me long after that to fill in the missing letters. She was asking me to come to the Shiba Manor. She had something important to tell me. I left post-haste. Shiba Manor. Kyokaku and I met in the special lounge we did last time. I asked when I sat down if there was a chance that her servants might get the wrong idea with us using this particular lounge, or the fact that I, a non-noble, was being summoned by her. Oh please. She said and lit a cigarette. They don't question me. And you can always just use the excuse that you and I became friends at Kyan's wedding, which we did, and that you, like all the others who know me, know better than to turn down a request from me. She blew out the smoke from her cigarette. So what's this important news you have for me? I asked. I had given information with Kyokaku via Hell Butterfly over the years. No one bats an eye if a Hell Butterfly goes flying out of my office, and I knew Kyokaku wouldn't disclose its contents. Since she's not a soul reaper herself, she can't send out her own. I've had some flunkies of mine digging up dirt on the incidents you've been investigating. They found something that might interest you. It didn't bother me that Kyokaku was running an investigation of her own, no matter how sloppy it was. If anything, it, again, pointed the eyes away from me. She would have had a bone to pick with Aizen ever since the incident with Urahara-san. Shibufuku Taiko and Hisuna also have a rather friendly relationship from what I know. And since Byakuya and Hisuna were both under him as seated officer in Division 13, it wouldn't be irrational to think that Shibufuku Taiko wouldn't think they were perfect for each other and try to push them together, especially if Kyokaku caught wind of it. If anything, the next person Aizen would suspect as being Zero would be Shibufuku Taiko or someone connected to the Shibas. And since noble families are nigh untouchable, he really can't do anything without more solid evidence. And that would be? I asked. You know how you told me you think that the hollows that killed Kukaki Sojun were ones that Hashima summoned? Kyokaku asked me. I nodded. Well, a few weeks before that mission, Kukaki Sojun publicly announced that he didn't plan to remarry and that he would only take Kukaki mantle until Byakuya came of age. He noted that his grandfather was all the better man for the job and that his son had the potential to be better than them both put together. And Isol's been pressing for Byakuya Fukutaiko to get married to his granddaughter, Isol Sabrina, now that Byakuya Fukutaiko is of marital age. I was starting to see a connection here. On top of that, did you know that there are several rare poisons in the Soul Society that can make frail, passive women, like Byakuya's mother, Kukaki Saya, look as if they die of disease? Kyokaku asked me. Now that's certainly interesting. I was already starting to see the direction this was headed in. Did you also know that the Icels have a monopoly of these special poisons? The Central 46 won't move in on it. With a noble family controlling trade, they view as a good way to stop it from getting into the wrong hands. Kyokaku continued. But in reality they're the ones who are dangerous. Oh, this is just perfect. Exactly, and my goons managed to get their hands on some old records indicating that a monopoly for one of these poisons was dropped in the interest of clan funding. This was shortly before Sayasama bit the dust. Kyokaku stated. What a remarkable coincidence. I said sarcastically. If you think that's good, listen to this. My clan inherited some old Isol servants some time ago. These same servants, after some good old-fashioned intimidation, claim they heard Baedjur talking to someone in the dead of night, but when they would come in to see if anyone was there, all they would see is the old fart standing in his chambers with no one else around. Kyokaku told me. And Hashima had the ability to create clones of smoke on a really long distance. I said. So basically we're left with circumstantial evidence that points to Isol Baedjur as a corrupted, greedy, selfish old man. And what's wrong with circumstantial? Kyokaku asked. You told me with one of your winged friends that you wanted the young Kukaki at the head of the storming of the manor, right? Well, that shouldn't be much of an issue now. Why's that? I asked. Kyokaku stood on the couch and began jamming the ceiling with her fist a few times. She then sat back down. Kyan's asleep upstairs in the room above us. This room might be soundproof, but even a heavy sleeper like Kyan could feel those vibrations. But wait, if your brother... Relax, in a situation like this you're about as close to the Kuchikis as possible without being an actual member. Besides, since the day Kisuke and Yoryuki got the boot from the Godei, I've been pissed about it and Kyan knows it. He wouldn't put it past me to start random investigations and talk about it with an associate of theirs. Kyokaku told me. It wasn't perfectly reassuring, but then again Kyokaku could be pretty persuasive. Shibufuku Taiko was down the stairs in minutes. Come on sis, can't you have respect for a guy who's trying to get some sleep after a long day? He asked Kyokaku. We've got bigger things to worry about than your lack of beauty sleep. Think you can drag young Kukaki here? Kyokaku asked him. Shibufuku Taiko yawned. I'll try. No promises. Kyokaku puffed on her cigarette again and grinned. Chocolate fountain. She hummed. Shibufuku Taiko snapped to attention. I'll get him right away. You're blackmailing him? I asked straight out, but sort of not surprised. I've got a whole bunch of things I know about my older brother that I know he'd never want Miyako or Yuka take Teiko finding out about. It makes things easier to get what I want around here. There are times when he fights back and even I can't stop him then. Kyokaka responded, taking another puff. Blackmail and intimidation must run in the family. I thought to myself. 2 weeks later. When Byakuya Fukutaiko found out what Kyokaka had to tell him, it was easy to tell he was livid, but he tried hard to hide the fact and keep himself calm. He put in a formal call to 2nd Division to get the Onmitsukido on hand and then stormed through the gates of the manor tranquilly seething with anger. A full-blown investigation was set in motion and Isolba Ejure was arrested on site. He was charged with accomplice to murder of Kukaki Sojun and premeditated murder of Kukaki Saya. He was convicted and found guilty by the Central 46. Justice was seen and Baejure was put to the sword. Byakuya Fukutaiko held a small celebration that his mother and father could rest easy. It was released in the paper how Kukaki Saya was poisoned without her, or anyone else's, knowledge. Apparently Isolba Ejure had bribed the waiter to serve Kukaki Saya a specific drink he had concocted. He lied about the contents. Said waiter's corpse was found at the bottom of an Isol family lake. The family wasn't involved, so they weren't punished. It was just one, greedy, stupid, and selfish man. At his execution Isolba Ejure cried out, "I spit on you all. I deserved more." Byakuya Fukutaiko broke it off with Sabrina, saying how he could never let a relative of the murder of his parents lay in his bedside. It was all the courage he needed to confront his grandfather about Hisuna. He asked me to watch from the shadows. He said that just feeling my riot so nearby would give him more confidence. I listened into the conversation. "Ji-san, there's something I need to discuss with you," Byakuya Fukutaiko said to his grandfather. "What is it, Byakuya?" Kukaki Taiko asked. "Ji-san, as you know, I must eventually marry. You are certainly not getting any younger. I will have to become head of the family eventually." Byakuya Fukutaiko spoke to his grandfather. "Are you saying you have your eye set on someone, Byakuya?" Kukaki Taiko raised an eyebrow. "That is exactly what I am saying, however." Byakuya paused. He took in a deep breath before speaking again. "You know the squad's 5th seat Sayuri Hisuna?" "Absolutely not." Kukaki Taiko was against the idea, as anyone could have figured. "I know this is highly irregular, but I'm drawn to Hisuna like bees to a flower. I've known her for so many years, Ji-san, and I just feel. To marry her would be to break the law of the Kukaki family." Kukaki Taiko responded. Byakuya dropped to one knee. "I know what I am asking for would be seen as a dishonor to our family and that it would be like spitting in the eye of tradition, but I love her, Ji-san." Kukaki Taiko sighed. "I know how you feel about her, Byakuya. I'm not getting senile in my old age to not see the buds of friendship bloom into flowers of love, but is marriage necessary? Why not take her as a mistress, or? I would not trample on Hisuna's good-natured spirit like that. I understand that Hisuna would become a target. She would be potentially attacked like my mother was. I know the nobles would constantly berate her, but I am not sure it is still a wise decision. Even knowing what she will face, would you break the law for an emotional bond?" Kukaki Taiko asked his grandson. "The entire traditional nature of the Kukaki family is at stake. In your own words, how can we enforce the laws if we ourselves are not willing to uphold it? If you wish for me to get on both knees, bow my head to the floor and beg, I will do so if it means gaining your approval," Byakuya Fukutaiko told his grandfather. "Don't, you would look foolish," Kukaki Taiko retorted. "I will have to think on this. The other nobles will surely not accept it as readily as I am. I didn't force your father into his marriage to your mother, but he chose her out of a noble family. I did not think you would be so bold as to look outside one. Hisuna has been my friend for nearly 50 years. You sheltered me to keep me safe, had me pulled from the 13th Division and put here where you could keep an eye on me. Besides you and Lelich, Hisuna became the only person I could ever count on. I did not think I would develop the feelings for her that I have, but I do not regret developing them. Hisuna is a wonderful woman and she would be a most welcome asset to the family, despite what the other families and the extended family may think." Byakuya Fukutaiko poured out. Kukaki Taiko sighed again. "It Will take some time to make the proper arrangements to lessen the impact this will have on the family. I don't know if Kukaki Teiko noticed it, but Byakuya Fukutaiko's head dropped slightly more towards the ground. I am not ashamed of you, do not think that. Byakuya Fukutaiko's lifted his head up and looked at Kukaki Teiko in the eyes, bewildered. You were the one who took the law into such high esteem, but I always had hoped that you would follow your heart in times such as these. You have been a great asset to me over the years. After your father died, though you resisted at first, you stepped into his shoes and now look at you. You are a grown, responsible, strong-willed, and highly skilled man. I watched the corners of Kukaki Teiko's face turn upwards into a smile. I am proud to call you my grandson. Byakuya's head dropped lower, but he seemed moved by his grandfather's words. Arigato, Ji-san. It looks like I might not need to use my geese on Kukaki Teiko after all. I thought to myself. So then pushing Hisuna and Byakuya together at the celebration in 2 weeks is for Hisuna's benefit, and to potentially keep any suitors off Byakuya Fukutaiko. The two of them deserve to enjoy a day to just enjoy what they have. I'm willing to sacrifice my good time to make that happen as much as I can. Besides, I'm not a party person. Pulling antics to keep two pupils turned companions of mine would be a much more enjoyable experience than actually doing party things. Iin Tamashi sighed. One of these days you need to learn how to balance your work and relaxation ethic. Says the woman who wants me to be as cynical as I was when I was alive, if not more. I hate you sometimes. I know you do. The feeling is mutual. 2 weeks later. The ceremony of the Sacred Captain Roast was rather entertaining. Even Kukaki Teiko and the head captain found it in them to knock the others down a peg or two. I found myself wondering how these people could cooperatively work together with some of the jokes flying at each other. Despite the fact that I hate Aizen's guts, a couple of his jokes were actually funny. A couple of racist jokes were thrown Tsun and Kigenjo Teiko's way. Of course, given the light atmosphere of the whole scenario, the two of them just laughed it off. Even the normally friendly Yukatake Teiko had some good line. I don't think I laughed as much, without blood or death filling the scent of my nostrils, as I did at this ceremony. There were several jokes I don't think I'm going to forget anytime soon. You know senpai, Captain Kiraku had said in reference to Anohana Teiko when he was up there, can get just about anyone to bend to her whims. If I get arrested in the world of the living, I want her to be my lawyer. The head captain is so old, Ishine Teiko had stated, that when I asked him how many years he had lived, he just sat there and said, I am this many, without moving at all. A good portion of the audience laughed at Ishine Teiko's impression of the head captain. I said to him, but you didn't move. He replies, that's how old I am. You know what the greatest thing about a blind co-worker is? Luska Teiko had asked to preface a joke about Tsun Teiko. You can flip them off and they can't tell. I went up to Kaname the other day and asked the 9th Division captain to publish a story I had for the CRITI communication. I was told that the newspaper was booked through the month. He held up the middle finger. No, I understand, Kaname. I'll come back next month. Hopefully the remnants of the Shihoan family can withstand the winter until then. You know, I never quite understood why Kuratsuka Teiko insists on wearing a mask. My own caption had stated, Mardi Gras and Halloween are only 2 days out of the year. I once bore witness to a man challenging Shunsui to drinking game. Every time I coughed they'd take a drink. I was having a good day that day and somehow my best friend still wound up with a hangover. This was one of Yukatake Teiko's best jokes of the evening. Being blind has its advantages. You can hear better and you have to learn to make your reflexes sharper since you can't rely on sight. However, even without my eyes I know 3 things will happen by the end of the day: the sun will set, justice will be served, and Kiraku Teiko will wake up the next morning with a hangover. Now I know I'm not the best looker, Kigenjo Teiko had stated, but hey, if I can live with the way I look and mirrors crack when I stare into them, imagine what Komamura Teiko must look like under that basket of his. I've heard of people being territorial, but one day, while I was getting one of my own out of 4th Division, I happened to see a man missing an arm. As a concerned captain I asked what happened. Oh, it's a sad thing, Anohana Teiko told me. That officer learned the hard way why you don't sneak food off Kigenjo Teiko's plate. Aizen was able to do a good impression of Anohana Teiko. Now I don't believe aggravated assault should go unpunished, so I inquired further. However, as it turns out, Kigenjo Teiko not only doesn't know his own strength, but he happened to be eating a rather large sandwich at the time. The whole arm had to be amputated. I later asked Kigenjo Teiko how human flesh tasted. He responded, "Chewy, but it's no good raw." This was one of the few jokes of Aizen's that I actually laughed at. After the ceremony there was a party. The whole event took place at night. I was a little off-put that the entire Godi was taking a break just to have fun, but according to Kukaki Teiko systems were in place. Apparently the non-division Soul Reapers and selected academy students, at times like these, covered unexpected developments. That just put me more on edge. This would be the ideal conditions for someone like Aizen to use, everyone in one place like this with greenhorns running emergencies. Then again, my arch-nemesis seemed to enjoy these social occasions. All that did was make Aizen more complex, and have me wonder his motives for what he attempts. However, tonight, Aizen was not my prime focus. The man would be too swarmed by single women and admirers to do anything rash. This took a great weight off my shoulders and let me spend the time to put Byakuya Fukutaiko and Hisuna together. I spotted Byakuya Fukutaiko surrounded by noble women, several of which weren't even of noble families underneath the Kuchikis. I think even Miyako's younger sister, Maya, was hitting on him. I waited for Susanna at a remote location. This wasn't a formal occasion, so everyone was in uniform, making select individuals harder to spot outside the captains and vice-captains who were dead giveaways with their hairs and armbands. "Ah, Lelich Dono, there you are." Susanna finally found me. "I'm ready to help you." "Good, come closer," I told her. She did so like she had one of her feet caught in a bucket until she was a few feet from me. I gestured to Byakuya Fukutaiko. "I'm sure our vice-captain, also your former classmate, needs no introduction." "Of course not," Susanna stated. "Good, then here's the thing, tonight it's our job to make sure we can get him in our division's 5th seat, Sayuri Hisuna, together in front of as many people as we can," I told Susanna. But, marrying outside nobility is against nobility, isn't it? Aren't we going to get into trouble?" Susanna seemed rather troubled by this. "Kukaki Teiko's going to try and make it okay with the other nobles," I told Susanna. "I don't know about this, Lelich. I mean, we're non-nobles, should we really be doing this?" Susanna seemed hesitant to get involved. Most would. Going to geese her into cooperation? Iin Tamashi wanted to know. "No, I believe I can earn her cooperation through less forceful methods," I responded. "Meaning?" Iin Tamashi wanted to know. "Susanna," I said, softly, "look at me." She looked straight into my eyes. I put one of my hands on her shoulder and placed my other firmly at the back of her head and pressed her lips to mine. I held the kiss until I felt Susanna's shoulder shake a little and then let go. "I'll do it," Susanna practically squeaked. I instructed Susanna on the plan and we got to work. I walked straight into the group of women Byakuya Fukutaiko found himself surrounded by and announced my presence. "Well, popular enough with the ladies, Fukutaiko." "Ah, are you acquainted with Byakuya-sama?" one of the nobles asked me. "I should be," I responded, "I used to be his teacher." "Yes, ladies, this is Lamprouje Lelich, my former Kido instructor." Byakuya introduced me. As I predicted, the noble women began throwing themselves at me, asking me to teach them. This was a party for the Godi members only, so the women around us were not only noble women, but also Soul Reapers. I could tell they were noble women because very few Soul Reapers wear jewelry on a regular basis and have the desire to start shamelessly flirting with Byakuya Fukutaiko like a whore at a bar. As Byakuya Fukutaiko pushed to get out of the crowd, passing the crowd from him to me, I let him know where he could find Hisuna. I did my best to play hard to get. Nobles might only be allowed to marry other nobles, but many of the female nobles of the Soul Society were so shameless that they threw themselves at the feet of anyone with charm and good looks. It was times like these I was thankful for my ability to attract women. It was about 10 minutes, as planned, when Susanna came to bail me out of the mess I was in. "Excuse me," She voiced loudly enough so that I, and the women around me, could hear her. "Oh, Susanna, is something the matter?" I asked. 10th seed Thylam is picking a fight with a drunken Kotsubaki Fukotaiko and 9th seed Kijura is too drunk to handle it. Susanna complained. She was lying, of course, but we set it up that way. "Sorry, ladies, got to go, duty calls," I responded. Susanna led me by the hand and we escaped around the corner until we were out of sight. "Did Byakuya Fukotaiko get to Hisuna okay?" I asked. "Yeah, I led them right to each other, like you asked," Susanna answered. "Alright then, time to move on to phase number 3. Hisuna and Byakuya Fukotaiko were dancing on the dance floor together. There were 2 unseated members, I could tell from their ryotsu, working the spotlights. I pulled out a mobile data carrier and instructed Susanna to discreetly knock out the 2 men working the lights. She did so by grabbing their pressure points. I geased the DJ and told him to go work the other light while Susanna worked the one she was standing nearby it. Then I took command of the music station. The playlist I had brought with me on my data carrier was sure to get Byakuya Fukotaiko and Hisuna recognized as more than just friends. I inserted the disc and turned the playlist on after the current song ended. Many of single dancers fled the dance floor. I watched as Byakuya Fukotaiko and Hisuna began dancing with each other. It reminded me of when Yuna and I danced at Shiba Fukotaiko's wedding. "So beautiful," Iin Tamashi stated. "You're not going to cry, are you?" I asked her. "And no," she vocalized vehemently. After a little while, a little more solemnly she added, "Maybe." I gave Susanna a signal to shine the lights and signaled my geese subject into following her example, and with a little work I managed to get Byakuya and Hisuna dead centered on the spotlight. I waited about 20 seconds before I grabbed Susanna and we fled the area. My instructions to my geese pawn were to work the lights until someone angrily asked him what he was doing, to which he'd be released from my hold. There was very little chance this could get back to me. For one, I didn't know how to do that pressure point trick without screwing it up more times often than not. Second, I stood to gain nothing by pushing Byakuya Fukotaiko and Hisuna together. Susanna was laughing herself silly when we got away into a clearing. "What's so funny?" I asked her. "I just feel so naughty doing something like that. My heart's still racing." Susanna giggled. "Well, just remember we were never here." I winked. "Right." She winked back. "Say, you know you did promise me a dance," she said. "I did at that," I said. Surprisingly enough, my playlist wasn't turned off. Susanna and I wound up dancing to a nice slow song. "I don't want you to feel tied down. If you find someone else, please don't let your feelings for me get in your way." I'm sure this isn't what Yuna meant when she said that to me all those years ago. I'm sure death wasn't part of her consideration. I'm not sure how I feel about Susanna right now. She's very dedicated to me. I don't feel as if she'd betrayed me. It reminds me of how Colin was with me. Colin. Every time I thought of her, I thought of the danger I had put her in when I attacked her as a hollow. I never got to see how that encounter turned out or what I would do after I slew myself. Eventually I'll be on the opposite side of that confrontation. I hope I will be ready. After the party, Susanna and I returned to the division grounds. I had the most wonderful time tonight, Lelich Dono. I had to shake off the serious case of déjà vu I was having. "Good, I'm glad, and thank you for your help," I told Susanna. "Anytime," she responded. I never thought," she blushed and stood like a shy schoolgirl with a crush, "I would get my first kiss like that. Does this mean that you and I are? We'll take it one day at a time," I told her. "I certainly don't dislike you. I think you're attractive, and the kiss, well, I didn't think you'd object. I needed some way to get you to go along with me. You're bad." She was laughing. "Indeed I am, rotten and evil to the core," I told her with a playful smile. Susanna was trembling. I thought she was about to throw herself at me, but instead she blurted out, I am sorry, I need to go to my quarters. I'll see you tomorrow." "What's up with her?" "Ah, she's shy, how cute." Somehow I get the feeling there's more to it than that. Either Susanna has some powerful self-control or I really shouldn't go check up on her for at least a half an hour. Lelich. Iin Tamashi chided. I merely laughed mentally. Well, tonight was certainly entertaining. Indeed, but you're going to pick right back up in Tailing Eisen tomorrow, right? Iin Tamashi asked. Of course. I responded. I'm sure even the builders of Rome had days where they simply did absolutely nothing. I started walking towards my quarters. Anyway, I could use some sleep. Have some pleasant dreams. I smiled at hearing that. I haven't had any nightmares since that incident in Karakura town. And ever since Yuna died nothing really awful had happened. Perhaps I was finally catching a break. However, I'd only know that taking things one day at a time. Chapter 22 End. Chapter 23, Lelich vs Maki, Ensnare of Darkness. Lelich's POV. It's been 4 solid years since that stunt Susanna and I pulled together to help Byakuya and Hisuna. Hisuna's not wearing a ring. I can only take that as Byakuya hasn't proposed to her just yet. Kukaki Teiko must still be trying to calm the nobles. Speaking of the nobles, Isolba Ajure's son, and new head of the Isol house, Isol Kentaro, seems like a much more prominent leader for the clan lead. He's done everything he can to restore his family's honor over what his father had done. He underwent Soul Reaper training starting this year and even turned all poison his house had collected over to the Central 46. I'm a little worried. I've never been fond of nobility ever since I was cast out of my own house, but for now it seems like things are going to go well. In other news, the next Kenpeki has been found. I haven't met the man, not yet anyway. He became part of the Godai 2 years ago. He was so high in Roriatsu and combat talent that the Central 46 deemed it unnecessary to befit the man with any training so long as they just threw him in Kigenjo Teiko's squad where the roughnecks gather. They figured that 2 Kenpekis in one squad could be beneficiary to the Godai. For the entirety of the 2 years the new Kenpeki, Zaraki Kenpeki, has been around, things haven't been too chaotic, but I've heard rumors, especially from Rangiku, about rising tension between the Kenpeki of old and the Kenpeki of new. Last week's Siriti Communication published an article about the clashing moral ethics both Kenpekis were lashing at each other. Someone actually managed to get word from both of them. Zaraki is a Neanderthal with the instincts of an animal. He believes in fighting for the sake of fighting. It's like a game to him. I've had to reprimand the man 3 times about proper code of conduct. Kigenjo had told a reporter. Kigenjo's too soft, Zaraki had stated. I couldn't care less about the theory of fighting or how to face my opponent with honor. At the end of the day all that matters is who is alive and who is dead. Fancy tactics don't mean a thing if you can't even lay a finger on your enemy. Zaraki Kenpeki sounded rather arrogant to me. He seemed like a naive child that needed to know his place. However, another part of the article listed interesting information about the 2 men. Kigenjo Teiko came from a family of nobility beneath the Akumaterns, which was a house beneath the Shibias. He fought his way from the bottom up and eventually defeated the previous Kenpeki, after a humiliating defeat at Anohana Teiko's hands. Many wondered if Kigenjo Teiko took advantage of the sorry state the 9th Kenpeki had been in or if he simply was merciful to his captain. Regardless of the case, he was very powerful in his own right. A battle for dominance had occurred between Kigenjo Teiko and the now-dead former vice-captain of the 11th Division had ensued for captaincy and Kigenjo Teiko defeated him with ease. Zaraki Kenpeki was said to have no formal history to speak of, not even another alias to go by. In fact Zaraki was simply the Rukanga he was from. He didn't have a proper name to speak of at all. It was stated that he spent his pre-Siriti days challenging men he thought were strong to fights. He had never lost a single fight. Zaraki said he had lost count of the amount of men that had fallen to his blade. It was reported that he came to the Siriti with a Zanpakuto already manifested, nameless, but released as determined by the 12th Division. Apparently Zaraki Kenpeki had so much raw, uncontrolled riot so that his sword was always in its released state. Forget captains being human-sized nightmare frames, I'd hate for Suzaku to go up against this guy using the lance a lot. I had never heard of such a phenomenon occurring with Zanpakuto before, but according to Kuratsuka Teiko, as mentioned in the article, it was a naturally occurring phenomenon. I personally asked him how much uncontrolled riot so one would have to have for such a feat to be possible, since such a thing wasn't mentioned in the article. For such a brutish action to occur one must have enough riot so naturally occurring in their body that they hardly notice the overflowing amount of riot so flowing about them. Further, Zanpakuto to perpetually manifest in Shikai would mean that the Soul Reaper fulfills the requirements the spirit wants from its wielder to be used, but the Soul Reaper could quite possibly be ignoring its sword's cry for companionship. It also means that the spirit's natural power, without any use of its abilities, is much less than the Soul Reaper's uncontrolled riot so. The amount varies from Soul Reaper to Soul Reaper, but if you are inquiring about Zaraki's case, I'd say he has the potential for captaincy, if he attempted it. Then why doesn't he? I had asked. He probably doesn't realize he can. Kuratsuka Teiko had stated that Zaraki is a rather barbaric individual with no other care than to be told where to cut and for how long. Is this a potential job for Lelich the mediator? Iin Tamashi had teased. Oh, very funny. I had responded. I don't think I necessarily think it's necessary for my interference on this one. Not to mention, what would be the point? 11th Division isn't a major concern of mine. You're wiser than I gave you credit for. I mentally sighed. Iin Tamashi left me alone after that. Currently I was having lunch with Rainjiku and Aloman Senpai, the latter of which had transferred to Division 11 and was standing at third seat. So what's Zaraki like? Rainjiku asked. He's not a bad guy at all. Aloman Senpai. I'm more worried about the current 6th seat Madare Mikeku. The bald guy? I asked. I made it a habit to memorize information about seated officers of every division my own rank and above ever since I became 9th seat. Sure, the man is just as battle-mad as the rest of your squad, but how is he a threat? 11th Division has broken into two factions. One faction is loyal to Kigenjo Teiko and likes how the division is being run, while others are in support of the new Kenpeke, Zaraki Kenpeke. Many believe that if he defeats Kigenjo Teiko that the 11th Division will fall into the stronger fighter holds the higher rank. 11th Division holds responsibility as much as the other squads. Aloman Senpai stated. And Madare Mikeku. I tried to lead Aloman Senpai into continuing to speak. I hate to admit it, but he's good, really good. If the whole division breaks out to where rank is determined by battle, I'm afraid I could lose my rank. I worked for too long to reach third seat, and by the current captain's honor I'm damn well going to keep it. Aloman Senpai declared. All this going on and Zaraki doesn't realize he can become captain by battle in front of 200 members. Rainjiku asked. Oh, he knows. He already challenged Kigenjo Teiko 3 times, but just as seated officers are allowed to make the decision to fight the current captain, so too does the current captain have the right to decline the challenge. Aloman Senpai stated. Did Kigenjo Teiko say why he wouldn't accept Zaraki's challenge? I asked. He says he believes Zaraki is in way over his head. Zaraki always returns that with, how will you know unless you fight me, but the captain tells him that that's the kind of attitude he cannot be comfortable leaving leadership in the hands of. Of course, many squad members think he's scared of losing or that he's just lazy. Aloman Senpai stated. What do you think though? I asked Aloman Senpai. She hung her head again and then turned her head to the side looking in the direction of her division. As much as I hate to admit it, I think Zaraki would win. He's a monster in battle. Lelich, if you felt this man's Ryatsu you would know. I know you haven't met him since you're a 9th seat and Kigenjo Teiko hasn't even bothered to give Zaraki a seated rank, but Zaraki is a monster. I used my authority to send him out on a mission to clear out a bunch of thugs from a 50th West Rukanga bar. I went along to mediate. His little pink-haired friend, Kuzujishi Yachiro, came with us. I thought he was going to storm in and kill everything in sight, but he was careful to pick out just the proper targets and he did so effortlessly. Those idiots didn't even have time to look around and see what hit them before Zaraki took them out, and with his bare hands. One of the men slashed Zaraki right at the back with a knife. Aloman Senpai took her wrist and did a popping sound with her mouth as she bent her wrist back. Whoa. You mean? Rainjiku was astounded. Yes, Aloman Senpai responded, the attacker's hand went flying off his wrist. The difference in power was that great. Before I could say anything in response, a tall Soul Reaper with a tan complexion, dark black hair and sunglasses ran up to our table. I recognized him as one of the few 8th seats of Division 11, Reijik Denryu Shisato. He called to her. The inevitable has occurred. Wait, seriously? Ullman Senpai was alarmed. Yes, you need to come to the battlegrounds with me right away. The captain wants all seated officers on the scene. Reijik Senpai stated. Oh wonderful, Ullman Senpai threw down her napkin. Sorry guys, I gotta go. It sounds like the showdown's about to start. Can we come? Rangiku asked. I may not be of 11th Division and my attendance may not matter, but I'd like to see history in the making. I stated. Even if I don't say that, I know Rangiku's going to drag me along anyway. Alright, let's go then. Ullman Senpai said, and together the three of us, plus Reijik Senpai, headed for Division 11. So what's with the informal greeting, Shisato? Rangiku knew that only close personal friends of Ullman Senpai, like herself, referred to the woman so informally. It's not what you think, Reijik Senpai said straight out. Our division doesn't feel the need to use honorifics to refer to comrades in arms. All, but Zaraki, it seems. Ungrateful bastard. He muttered that last part. So both of you are on Kigenjo Taiko's side? I asked. Zaraki's a complete and utter barbarian. Having him as a captain would completely upset the harmony and pride Division 11 shows. With him in charge, Division 11 will become known as the division of psychopathic dogs of war, only kept in line by those with good heads on their shoulders, and Unohana Taiko. Ullman Senpai stated. Just had to mention her, didn't you? I shuddered. We eventually made it to the battlegrounds where Kigenjo Taiko and Zaraki Taiko stood on either side of battlefield. Since there wasn't a vice captain in the 11th Division, Ullman Senpai had to act as referee for the match. She had to do some routine checks to make sure everything was in order. Any idea why Kigenjo Taiko finally conceded to face Zaraki? Rangiku asked Reijik Senpai. Something tells me we'll find out right as the match starts, or get a vague understanding of it. Reijik Senpai replied. I was thinking the same thing, I thought to myself. I got my first look at Zaraki Kenpeki. He was a tall man, about half a foot under Kigenjo Taiko. He had a light complexion and black hair that was spiked in the back going down the full length of his neck. I could feel the sheer will to inflict bodily harm radiating from the man. Kigenjo Taiko pulled out his large Zweihander and slammed it into the ground, cracking the tile. The sword was about as large as Kigenjo Taiko himself. There was no traditional guard to speak of, and the hilt and handle were black. The hilt took the shape of a ring like the end of a kunai. Zaraki, I've put up with a lot of your wild antics over the last 2 years. You've tried my patience again and again. I've turned a blind eye to roughing up junior officers, blatant challenges of senior members, and I've even allowed you to make a few jokes at my family's expense, but to allow your little friend to urinate on the statue of the first Kenpeka because the both of you were hopelessly lost in the Siridi is an offense I will not allow to go unpunished. You want to duel me so badly, consider it done. Told ya, Reijik Senpai said to Rangiku. To be perfectly honest, I didn't think you'd be this pissed off, Zaraki responded, but I'm sort of glad you are. I'm going to win this fight, and when I do I'll be captain of this division whether you like it or not. You arrogant worm. Kigenjo flexed up his muscles. I will show you your place. Bankai. Kigenjo Taiko gripped the ring on the end of his sword until he crushed it with his bare hands. Pure energy flowed out around him as armored, spiked knuckles that then formed into fingerless armored gauntlets that ran up his arms to his shoulders. Large, pointy spikes ran all around the gauntlets. He picked up his sword with both hands and drove it into the ground. The sword, blade, and all became the consistency of black steel, and a red horsehair tassel attached itself around a new ring formed on Kigenjo Taiko's large sword. 2 yellow lines ran down the length of the blade. Kigenjo Taiko picked up the sword with one hand and whirled it around. Several of us in the audience had to duck as waves of spiritual power came flooding out from the 11th Division captain. Kigenjo Taiko then stuck his sword back in the ground. Chikubunkatsu Risura. Earth-dividing bone crusher. Bankai already. Reijik Senpai was in awe. We can hardly get the captain to much of anything, let alone fight. He must really be pissed. Zaraki looked at Kigenjo Taiko and smiled as he put a hand to his cheek. You done? He asked Kigenjo Taiko. Yes. Kigenjo Taiko bore down on Zaraki. Good. Zaraki then ran at Kigenjo Taiko with a loud battle cry, one hand on his Zanpakuto with no form to speak of. Kigenjo Taiko ran at Zaraki Taiko, carrying a high stance, both hands on his blade, yelling a battle cry of his own. What happened in that moment would become engraved in all our minds forever. Kigenjo Taiko swung down with overbearing force along Zaraki's sword arm before Zaraki even reached him. His Bankai's blade snapped off at the midsection upon collision with Zaraki's shoulder. Zaraki continued to charge and, with one hand, brought his sword down upon Kigenjo Taiko's shoulder and dragged the blow down Kigenjo Taiko's torso and slashed straight through to the top of the man's leg. I never saw so much blood pour out of a single person at one time. Kigenjo Taiko's Bankai disengaged and blood poured from his mouth. Zaraki had slashed through the man's heart, right lung, and several other important organs. Kigenjo Taiko's eyes rolled back in his head and he fell forward into the stadium, cracking his forehead. A single strike. Zaraki was indeed a monster. To take out a captain using his Bankai in a single strike like that was just... There are no words in my vocabulary to express what I was feeling right now. I am so glad this man is on the right side. For real, Iin Tamashi replied. Uloman Senpai, despite knowing that it wouldn't do any good, counted to 20, it was the trial by combat regulation. However, I think many of Kigenjo Taiko's supporters were just in awe of what had occurred, hoping that with each count that Kigenjo Taiko would make a miraculous recovery and fight back. Even the Magnificent Zero couldn't pull a miracle out of this one. I grinned as I watched. I don't know why, but for some reason I was smiling, almost pleased by the fact that Zaraki had won so effortlessly. I didn't rightfully understand it myself. 20. Uloman Senpai shouted. That is it, Kigenjo Taiko has lost. From here on out, Zaraki Kenpeki is now captain of the 11th Division. No. A man with short, raven black hair leapt up onto the stage. I recognized him. He was Ichinose Maki, 8th seed of 11th Division. Ichinose, calm down, there is nothing more we can do. I heard Tasenteiko's voice. A section of the audience parted so that he could step forward. I didn't realize Tasenteiko was here. No. I will not accept this man as our captain. Ichinose refuted. Ichinose, Kigenjo Taiko lost. Rules are rules. Uloman Senpai stated. Tasenteiko, do something. Ichinose seemed to be having a meltdown. The battle is over. There is nothing I can do. Ichinose flew into a rage and attempted to attack Zaraki. Although it wasn't necessary, given how strong he was, and it technically wasn't against the law since Zaraki hadn't been inducted yet, I stopped Ichinose by blocking his blade with my own. Lamp-Rouge Lelich. Move. This is outside your jurisdiction and I am your superior in rank. Ichinose barked. I never really was fond of Ichinose. He held some of the same ideals did, that those with power should use their power to help others, but he was more concerned with those who reveled in their own power rather than abusing it. Also the type of power he cared about only referred to physical power, not political. He and I never saw eye to eye. We were teachers for last year's 4th year advanced academy students. Ichinose taught Kendo. I taught Kido, as usual. I could never convince Ichinose that those who abuse their power were the more dangerous ones, but he was naively convinced that such people did not exist. He was so much like a close-minded Suzaka that it sickened me. Sure, Zaraki might not have given the greatest first impression, but first impressions aren't everything. Colin sure learned that lesson well about me, I'm sure. The fight is over, I told him, there's no reason to take your anger out on your new captain. You'll just wind up hurting yourself. I'm in your way to protect you, not him. I don't care. Move. Ichinose shouted. Ichinose, I'm afraid I must agree with Lamp-Rouge. I do agree with his actions. While we may not like it, the man you just tried to attack is to be the next 11th Division captain. Tasenteiko spoke. Are you that pissed off that I killed my spiritual predecessor? Zaraki asked Ichinose. Of course I am. Itchy Nose declared furiously. A demon like you cannot become a captain. A demon like you deserves to be sent back to the very hell you came from. Your name's Lelich, right? Zaraki asked me. Yes, sir. I stated. You got a bone to pick with my division's 8th seat? Zaraki asked me. I don't really a bone to pick per se, I said, turning towards the future captain. It's more like we're at odds on a minor disagreement. And you, he addressed Itchy Nose, you got a bone to pick with me, right? Itchy Nose just scowled. Zaraki looked at Tsunteiko. I know I'm not a captain yet, but how's about I show some captainly actions right now? Tsunteiko snorted. I wouldn't exactly call any actions you could do captain-like, but since your promotion is inevitable as things stand, seeing a dispute between one of your officers and an officer of another division settled by your words and deeds would be something of note at your induction. Zaraki grinned. Then here's how it's gonna go down. Itchy Nose, right? Zaraki addressed the 8th seat. If you want to take me on, then you gotta get past the person standing in your way first. Lamperouge Lelich is a 9th seat and not even of our squad, he has no cause to stand in my way. Itchy Nose barked. Actually I do. I make a good impression with the future captain of the 11th Division and I get respect from the whole squad. Everything was laid out in my head. Zaraki would have Itchy Nose and I fight each other. Upon my victory, which I was sure would happen given Itchy Nose's emotional state, Zaraki would mention my actions to Kukakiteiko, and since many believed in his ushering of the strong of skill having placement above those weaker than them, I was assured a 7th or 8th seat position. I had no problem defeating Itchy Nose and possibly stepping over his corpse to reach my goal. Itchy Nose, if I left him alive or alone, having come this far, would just wind up getting in my way and potentially become an ally of Aizen just to screw with me or reveal my identity as Zero to the head captain. The last laugh would be on him, of course, if he assisted Aizen, but I couldn't take the risk of the latter happening. He's an 8th seat though and an expert in Kendo, Shunpo, and Kido. You are merely a Kido master and a Shunpo expert, but are merely a practitioner of Kendo. Are you certain you can win given that Itchy Nose Maki is a superior in rank? Iin Tamashi asked me. Itchy Nose is blinded by rage, I responded, he'll be easy to verbally manipulate into losing his focus. However, so long as you continue to support me I won't fall so easily. Spoken like a true partner. I could almost see Iin Tamashi's facial expression in my mind as she prepared for battle as I did. Let's do this. So here's what we're gonna do, Zaraki stated, if you defeat Lelich here, I'll let you take me on. Lamperouge Lelich is a 9th seat. I will not be defeated by an inferior in rank. Hey Blondie! Zaraki shouted at Aloman Senpai. Stay where you are and continue to referee. I'm gonna get me a good seat. Kenpeka leapt from the battle arena to a nearby rooftop and sat down on it. His friend, Kuzugishi Yachiroa, sat by him. You can do it, Lulu. She called out to me. How does she know my nickname? I wondered. Maybe she just thought of it. Iin Tamashi chuckled. I mean, Lulu is really the only good nickname to come up with for you. I decided not to comment, it wasn't important. Still. It must suck to know that your own division member is rooting against you. I taunted. Itchy Nose looked at me with anger. Both of us then about face, put away our swords and walked to opposite ends of the arena. This duel is an official, captain-approved battle, between Itchy Nose Maki, 8th seat of 11th Division, and Lamperouge Lelich, 9th seat of 6th Division. The winner is determined when one Soul Reaper stays down for a count of 20 or gives up. This. Aloman Senpai paused and called over to Zaraki. What are the rules on killing? She asked. Pay? Why do we need rules? This is a fight, isn't it? I say anything goes. Ah, well, you heard the soon-to-be captain, anything goes. There is no time limit and the combatants are thereby determined to come to their own terms of victory. On my mark, begin. Rally and motivate, Iin Tamashi. I called out my Zanpakuto immediately. I read the profiles of every high-ranking officer I meet. Itchy Nose was no different. The man loved to gauge his enemies and didn't go all out. He also loved to analyze his opponent's techniques, often figuring out how they worked. I couldn't afford to do the same. Itchy Nose had me beaten hands down. This wasn't like fighting a hollow, making a daring escape or taking down a corrupted officer, and it wasn't like riding in a nightmare either. I had to make damn well sure that I had the capabilities as a soldier. It was true that I had gone several rounds with Susanna, but I taught her some of her tricks. Also a few taps and bruises were nothing compared to sword wounds, learned that one from Hashima. Itchy Nose came flying at me with a controlled, two-handed, angled sword swing. I blocked with my force shield and then projected it to knock him off balance before using my cape to vanish. I got right behind him and put my hand at his back. Hado 33, Sakasui. I got him right in the back, but Itchy Nose swung without even flinching from the damage. I leapt back, but my reflexes were beneath his and he nicked my Shiakusho in the lapel. I'm not going to take it easy on him. I outstretched my palm and gathered energy. Not in the slightest. I fired off a powerful dark fireball at Itchy Nose. He dodged to the side via Shunpo. My attack caused the crowd to need to disperse. There was an unspoken rule about Kido in the 11th Division, no Kido, which meant the crowd probably wasn't going to expect fireworks heading out into the audience. Thankfully, I'm not part of 11th Division and Zaraki did say anything goes, so that rule does not apply to me. Itchy Nose disappeared and attempted to attack my flank. I blocked with my shield. He managed to chip into it this time. His attacks are getting stronger. I had improved since I first learned the technique, so with my other hand I fired off a quick dark fireball into Itchy Nose's face. I pivoted on my right foot and took a 360-degree turn, while widening the distance between us as I did. Bakudo 63, Seijo Sabaku. While Itchy Nose was bound, I followed up my combo. Hado 11, Tsuyuzuri Raiden. I shocked Itchy Nose to his very core. He hit the dirt, coughing. Had enough punishment. I taunted. With what limited movements Itchy Nose had in his wrists, he used his sword to cut through my Seijo Sabaku and stood up, but he didn't charge. Lamp-Rouge Lelouch. So this is when I find out what he's learned. I smirked to myself. You fight primarily using Kido and energy attacks, so you keep your distance on your enemy. That vest that you sport so proudly is definitely well earned. However, your only means of defense are those two shields you project from your hands. On offense you have no means of fighting within close range, otherwise you would not have widened the distance between us earlier when you cast your Bakudo. Itchy Nose prattled off. How very astute that you've figured out my fighting style, but knowing is only half the battle. I flung my arm out in front of me. Unless you plan to release your sword you won't stand a chance against me, and I think you know that. You'd do well not to underestimate me, Lamp-Rouge Lelouch, or the power of my Zanpakuto. Itchy Nose held his sword down at an angle, pointing it towards the ground. Flash and burst, Najigajumi. As he spoke the release command, Itchy Nose titled his arms, as he held the blade, as he swung them towards his 12 o'clock, as if his arms were clock hands. There was a blinding flash of light. I couldn't see a thing. I shut my eyes immediately. Fool. Even without my eyesight I can see just fine. I saw Itchy Nose's spiritual pressure heading towards me at my 6. I pivoted, eyes still closed. Hado 33, Sakasui. His Ryotsu retreated. I couldn't see the damage. I didn't have to. Bakudo 61, Rikyu-Koro. His Ryotsu froze. Here goes. O violent torrents, ye gods of grace and nature, hear my voice. Inscribe your breath upon the sphere of the night and place it in the palm of my hand. Trees of midnight bend in the starkest wind. Hado number 82, Midori-tsuki Teiho. Green Moon Cannon. I thrust my arm out straight and grabbed my wrist and slid my hand down my arm as if pulling the reload pump on a shotgun. A giant fireball, about 5 times the size of a Shakkeiho attack, went barreling towards Itchy Nose. Given the distance, contact would be imminent in 5 seconds. I counted to 5.5 to erase margin of human error before opening my eyes. Although burned and bleeding in the chest, Itchy Nose came charging at me. Damn these determinative types. I used my Zanpakuto's power to disappear only to get Itchy Nose coming at me from my right side. I blocked with my shield only to feel a surge from my left side. I disappeared instantly and reappeared on the other side of the stage. What just happened? Wait a minute. I disappeared as Itchy Nose came at me again. His specialty is light. It's a stretch, but I get the feeling he can create visual illusions to confuse his opponent and turn himself invisible. It's like having a permanent Bakudo 26 cast on you. I closed my eyes and teleported again, this time to center stage. However, unlike Hashima's smoke clones, an optical illusion can't hold Ryotsu. I waited until Itchy Nose made his move. I saw him coming and prepared to take aim with my fireball, charging it. What I was seeing showed that Itchy Nose was coming at me head-on, a foolish move given my Zanpakuto's power. However, as he drew near I closed my eyes and saw with my sixth sense that I was being deceived. I picked up Itchy Nose coming right at me from behind. I pivoted immediately and shot him at point blank, knocking him out of the ring. Everyone stood and waited to see what would happen. Itchy Nose got up, the burns in his chest really looked like they hurt a lot. His breathing was hardened. Do you think I'm going to give up just because I'm outside the ring? Of course not, there's no rule in place that says the match ends if you fall out of the arena. Anything goes, remember? I asked. TCH, I must admit you're better than I expected, but if you think that you have the advantage in ranged attacks you're wrong. Shine brightly, Najigajumi. Itchy Nose's blade turned into sword of pure light and energy. He leapt back into the arena and attacked me. I used my cape's disappearing trick to escape. When I reappeared though, I found 3 projectile beams of light heading towards me. I didn't have time to put up a proper defense and got hit by each one. The first 2 hit my shoulders and the last one hit my chest. I bled from my wounds. Itchy Nose came at me. It hurt too much to wrap myself in my cloak, so I used Shunpo to dodge, but he got on me way too cuckily. Damn, at this rate, I blocked a strike with my shield, which nearly shattered upon impact. I don't think I'll make it, wait. Of course. Fighting through the pain, I escaped from Itchy Nose and reappeared. Say Itchy Nose, did you know the captain you're so fond of beat his predecessor after he got wasted by Anoha Taiko? Do you think someone like that is actually a fighting master? I taunted. Don't you dare you talk about Kiganjo Taiko like that. Itchy Nose charged at me. I fought through the pain again and disappeared. Come now, Zaraki will be a great captain, you'll get to fight day in and day out just like the meathead you are. I chuckled. Squad 11 is about more than just fighting well. He went after me again. I teleported in order to escape. One more and his rage will have consumed him enough to make this excruciatingly painful. How does it feel to have your butt being handed to you by a lower rank? Sure, you put a few scratches on me, but I've had worse. Just ask Hashima. Oh wait, you can't, he's dead. I'm the one who finished him off, aren't I? Damn you, Lamp-Rouge! Itchy Nose roared as he came at me. Bingo! I outstretched my hand and turned my wrist so that my palm faced the sky. Kokoro Hase! I snapped my fingers. Itchy Nose dropped to the ground and clutched his head, roaring out in pain. Ack! My head. Hurts, doesn't it? I asked as I outstretched my palm, glowing with Ryotsu, towards Itchy Nose. Kokoro Hase is my Zanpakuto's most devastating ability. It damages the mind through a sonic wave too fast to stop and too strong to repel, especially if your mind has already been weakened. Itchy Nose looked at me like a frightened child, realizing the reasoning behind my taunts. Oh, so you figured it out? I asked and turned up the force of my attack. Itchy Nose grabbed his head and cried out in pain. Right now you and I are linked by a telepathic bond. I can put pressure on your mind, potentially crushing it into tiny pieces. Your resistance is futile. It is impossible to escape my grasp. I watched Itchy Nose lying at my feet like a dog and took some satanic pleasure at it. He crawled towards me. Look at you crawling on the ground like a dog. As long as you're down there, bark while you're at it. You know people can see and are listening to you. Iin Tamashi reminded me. And that's a problem. Why exactly? What's wrong with them knowing that I don't show remorse to my enemies? I asked. Your behavior is borderline on sadism. You might want to cool it a bit. Iin Tamashi told me. Itchy Nose suddenly grabbed my ankle. Fuck you, Lamp-Rouge! He said through the excruciating pain. I kicked him in wrist to get him to let go of my ankle. Hado 1, show. I shoved him along the ground. I released my hold on Itchy Nose. I had done enough damage. His mind wouldn't crack. I could tell. My finisher would have to be a more tangible attack. But first, some gloating was in order. I needed to gloat, my ego demanded it. Your ego needs to be kept in check. Quiet. Look at you on the ground, Itchy Nose. You bragged how much better you were than me. You said that a ninth seed had no reason getting in your way, but it seems that this ninth seed just ruthlessly kicked your ass. I touched one of my wounds and rubbed the blood in between my fingers. Sure, I'm bleeding, you managed to get me, but it's a small price to pay for winning a fight against a superior officer. I didn't think I'd come out of this unscathed. However, since anything goes, perhaps I'll send you to join your captain that you were so fond of. You two can rejoin each other in the next life. I held my palm up towards the sky. Now, let's see if I can get this right. I watched Itchy Nose as I chanted, just in case he did anything. Seeping crest of turbidity. Itchy Nose remained still. Arrogant vessel of lunacy. I saw Itchy Nose twitch and move, I continued. Boil forth and deny. I watched Itchy Nose go for his sword, but he was still shaky, I had time. Grow numb and flicker. Saijyaku na jigajumi. Itchy Nose shouted. Sparkling lights began to appear. Disrupt sleep. What's this? An attempt at a reenactment of a famous scene from a bad novel series? I asked myself. Crawling queen of, all of a sudden my voice left me. I was suddenly being crushed by Itchy Nose's spiritual pressure. I had been stopped mid-incantation, but I couldn't move, but the Roriatsu I had stored up went haywire. What the hell is going on? A sphere of light engulfed me. Everything went white, I couldn't see anything, but I could hear Itchy Nose's voice. This is my most powerful technique, Saijyaku na jigajumi. It will destroy you. I did not think I'd have to resort to this. You take pride in watching your opponent suffer. I was waiting for you to engage in a long-winded incantation, so that I could use it. Impossible, I'm the chess master here. Me. There's no way he could have played me like that. Impossible. Farewell, Lamperouge Lelich. The last thing I heard was my own scream before I whited out. When I opened my eyes I could see nothing but light. My body felt weightless. I couldn't move. My vision was hazy, but I could feel as if someone was holding me. Red hair draped down into my sight. Fear not, my master, I will protect you. Iin, Tamashii? When I came to, I was face down on the ground. My body was in immense pain, but I could feel Iin Tamashii's cape still wafted over me, but it felt heavier somehow, as if she herself was at my back rather than just a cape. I will help you, my master, get up and finish this. What do you want me to do? I asked. Place your body in my hands. I will protect it. I am your partner after all. Trust me. Yes, I trust you. I was still seeing through my eyes, I had little to no control over my motor skills. It was as if Iin Tamashii was controlling my limbs. However, I could still move my own mouth. I could feel Riots radiating from me. No, it's not possible. Itchy Nose was quaking in fear. Oh, but it is. I stated. It seems that Zanpakuto really live up to their name, and my Zanpakuto certainly lives up to hers. That was quite a flashy light show. It'd be a great trick to entertain kids at parties. I taunted. I'd laugh, but it hurts. Watch what happens when one truly understands the power of their Zanpakuto. I looked deep into Itchy Nose's pupils. I could see the fear in his eyes as Iin Tamashii's intangible form rose from out of my cape. I sure hope you know what you're doing. Itchy Nose. This is the end. My arms moved on their own as if they were conjuring a concoction like one of Hecate's 3 henchwomen. Everyone in the audience, you may want to back away. I voiced. I don't exactly know what's about to happen, but it's guaranteed to startle and amaze you. Iin Tamashii controlled my arms as she moved them as if I was just chucking something heavy with both hands. The area on stage began to darken as a thick fog began to cover the area. Itchy Nose faded from sight as he disappeared into the thick black and brownish yellow fog. I am protecting you from your own technique, but when I eventually teach it to you, be sure not to get caught in it. Just for future reference. Iin Tamashi told me. You mean this? Yes, Lelich, you have taken the first step towards learning your Bankai. It will take you a while to learn and even longer to master, but I believe you are ready. Iin Tamashi's presence left and I regained control of my body. It ached like no tomorrow, but Iin Tamashi was doing her best to allow me to hold myself erect. When the fog faded, Ichino's was, well, he wasn't about to get up anytime soon with a total lack of muscle, or skin or tissue or ligaments. Aloman Senpai shrieked. Zaraki was laughing. Now that is a finishing move. Kido-oriented or not, that is wicked. I heard him cackle. Lamparouge! 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 The crowd was chanting my name. Feeling the need to entertain the crowd, and gloat a bit, I went over and plucked Ichino's skull off his vertebrae. I looked at it as I held it up high. Alas, poor Ichino's, I knew him well. Those that got the joke began laughing hysterically. I lightly lobbed Ichino's skull out of my hand and then sealed my Zanpakuto. I then began to stagger. My vision began to haze. Well, I figured this would happen. I thought as I continued to stagger. Well, here's to some time spent comatose and several weeks off work. I fell over onto the ground and passed out. End of Chapter 23. Chapter 24, Lelich's True Nightmare. Lelich's POV. I woke up to the sight of a wooden roof. I could hear birds chirping, but surprisingly no beeping sounds of machines showing my vitals. I also didn't see a single person around me, waiting for me to wake up. How fitting, I thought, of course no one would come to see me. I have no real friends. Oh good, you're awake. The voice I heard shook me like the tremor before an earthquake. I looked over to my left. Sitting in a chair, in her usual Brighton neon straitjacket, was CC. C.C. I sat up, confused. I felt pain as I sat up. I could feel bandages wrapped around my chest, but there were no wounds along my shoulders. I must say, she said, standing up and striding across the room. Your body has quite the tenacity to live, despite your mind and heart seeking death so strongly. What? It seems Suzaku couldn't completely go through with it. It's like with Mao, you should have asked your friend to kill you instead of just to run you through. C.C. held her hands apart and put up her fingers to show about a decimeter's distance. He missed your heart by this much. Wait, what's going on? Was all of that just a dream? Have I just been in comatose for so long and I've actually been alive this whole time? No, that's not possible, that's not even fair. What the hell gives? I went to get some of your things. I have a change of clothes for you. C.C. told me. What are you talking about? I should be dead. I've been dead for 68 years. I've had dreams while I've been dead. I shouted. Sounds like someone had quite the coma dream. C.C. told me. Unsurprising considering you've been unconscious for a little over 2 months. No. I got up out of bed only for my wound to be aggravated. You'd better keep calm. You're going to aggravate your wound if you do. Suzaku may not have been accurate, but he was very thorough. C.C. told me. Why did you preserve me? I was supposed to die. I shouted. You and I have a contract to uphold. C.C. told me. You have yet to fulfill your end of the bargain. If you don't want your life, I will merely take ownership of it. You are the most self-centered woman I have ever met. I said with cold, grimaced eyes. Perhaps I am at that. She said and then threw herself onto the bed back first. That all couldn't have been a dream. C.C. What do you know about Soul Reapers? I asked. Soul Reapers? You must have hit your head rather hard to come up with something like that. She said. Don't play games, you and I met once before over 50 years ago, right? Before Britannia invaded Japan, before I was even born. Right? Right. C.C. sat up and tilted her head up towards the roof. Getting hysterical is just the same as getting mad. I know nothing of these soul reapers as you call them, and I certainly don't recall meeting a duplicate of yourself so many years ago. I told you not to tell me when we met, but it's all right now because I've seen it. No, wait, if that really was a dream, then none of that ever really happened, did it? How could all of that just been some comatose dream? Yuna, Jin, Ranjaku, Aizen, Urahara-san, Byakuya, Hisuna, Kyukaku, Akari Teiko, Susanna, Hirako Teiko, everyone, did I make them all up? I paused in my thoughts. It would definitely make for an interesting story if I did, but, for all of that to have been just a dream, just doesn't seem right. I was so depressed I just sat down next to CC. Lelouch, you accomplished your goal, to create a new world for all. Why is it that you don't wish to see the world you created flourish with your own eyes? C.C. asked me. Because I don't deserve to. I responded. After all I've done, the blood on my hands, Zero Requiem was. C.C. cut me off, was a last resort because you thought your reason for doing it all had vanished into thin air. Should you die while she lives? Is that fair to her? She knows what you did, she understands. She looked forward through the window on the opposite side of the house. While all those people cheered at the death of Lelouch the tyrant and the return of their hero, Zero, Nunnally wept her pretty little, newly reopened, eyes dry over your bleeding corpse. She loved you, Lelouch. Despite everything you did, your sister still loved you. A monster like me doesn't deserve to be loved. You are a fool. C.C. stood up and strode across the room to the window. Hey. I didn't even want to be alive right now. I started at the ground. I wish that I could go back to sleep, back to the dream. Were you having a nice dream, Lelouch? C.C. asked. I was. I smiled. Was the dream better than reality? She asked. I don't think this is reality. I said and stood up and walked to the window next to CC. I looked out at the lush green prairie of fields of wildflowers where we were. I looked at CC. This is just a temptation, a test if you will. Isn't that right, Iin Tamashi? Who? C.C. asked. No transformation, then, does that mean I really, no. Lelouch. C.C. put a hand on mine. Just calm down. I don't want things to be like this. I shut my eyes. I want to go back, I don't care what's real or what's fake, I want to go back to the way things were. All of the people I met, all the things I've done, it can't all just be a dream created by my mind. Reality might be hard to accept, but, is it really that bad? C.C. asked me. I opened my eyes to look at her. There are tears in your eyes, Lelouch, are you okay? I don't know. I responded. But, if I am alive, what will I do? Where will I go? I'd have to change my name. No one must ever know that I'm alive. You and I can go anywhere we want, but wherever we go. Let's go together. C.C. said to me. She walked towards the door and opened it. Are you coming, Lelouch? The rest of our time together awaits. I didn't know what to do. I never felt so confused. What is reality? I asked myself. Which situation is real? Did I really dream up 68 years of memories in 68 days? How, why? Lelouch, are you not coming? C.C. asked me. She outstretched her hand to me. Come with me. I will never betray you. You know that. You and I are accomplices. What is it I want to do? I could just take C.C.'s hand and go with her, but I want to go back, to the Soul Society. I don't want to go on like this, so many things have happened, I don't want to write it off as just a dream. It can't be just a dream. I shut my eyes and grit my teeth. This has to be a test, I was just about to learn Bankai, things were looking up. Is that it? Was all of that just a dream and none of it really mattered? No, that can't be true. I dropped to my knees in anguish. Iin Tamashi, if this truly is a test, please, no more, I want to wake up. Please, I can't take this. What does the world you are in have to offer? I opened my eyes. There was no scenery and standing in C.C.'s place was Iin Tamashi. Oh, thank Britannia. I was extremely close to breaking down into tears. Are you that content with the way things are? Despite having suffered so much even after death, you still wish to continue the path you are on. You are not content with the idea that all that has happened thus far to be a dream and to go on living. Iin Tamashi asked me. I found the strength to rise to my feet. Of course I'm content. I put the past behind me. This is the only reality that matters. It's true, I wish I could have saved Yuna, I do wish I did not have to resort to Zero Requiem, but what's past is past. You know that I do not cling to it. Had I lived, I suppose I would have traveled with C.C across the world until my time came, but that is not the path fate has chosen for me. You are my partner now. That is the reality I accept. That is the reality I will shape the future for. That is the reality I live in. Everything went white. I could hear ringing in my head and eventually I could feel pain, but I could hear voices, beeping of a machine. I'm back, I'm home. I opened my eyes. I could see many Shiakushos, but my vision was blurry at first. I think he's waking up. Hisuna? My vision adjusted itself. Standing around my bedside were Susanna, Hisuna, Byakuya Fukotaiko, Rangiku, Aloman Senpai, Naomi, Nimue, Vera, Keshiba Senpai, Ishine Teiko, Atmaka Fukotaiko, Luska Teiko and even Kyokaku. What are you all doing here? I asked. We've been really worried about you, Yubaka. Susanna was tearing up. You've been in a coma for a little over 2 months now. Byakuya Fukotaiko stated. Some of us didn't think you would wake up. 2 months? So there was something to take away from all of that. I looked at Ishine Teiko and Luska Teiko. Can you two really afford to take off work to check up on an old friend? Actually, amazing coincidence was that we're both here to get some seated officers out of physical therapy. Ishine Teiko responded. Most of everyone here was already here checking up on you. Well, I sort of talked Byakuya-sama into coming, who helped me talk everyone else into checking up on you. Hisuna stated. Somehow I just got the feeling that you'd be waking up today. I told you there was nothing to worry about. Kyokaku stated, pulling out a cigarette and lighter. Ishine Teiko cleared his throat and pointed to the no smoking sign above the doorway. Kyokaku lit up anyway. How can you just ignore that? Ishine Teiko shouted at her, only to get decked in the face. Pipe down, it's not like Lelich is gonna complain. Kyokaku retorted. I shifted down in my bed. And no, I'm fine, by all means. She'd better be careful of Anohana Teiko though. Weren't worried, Kyokaku? Rangiku asked, disbelievingly. For someone who was assured that Lelich would make a speedy recovery, you certainly came here a lot. Quiet. Kyokaku shouted. I'm telling you I wasn't worried. Are you really going to be alright, Lelich Dono? Susanna sniffed. Yeah, I think I'm going to be okay. I told her. Really, senpai? Naomi asked. Are you really going to be okay? I nodded. I've never felt better. I said. A few weeks physical therapy and I'll be fit to work. Good to hear. Keshiba senpai stated. Ah. Excuse me. A voice I didn't recognize called out. Oh, Katetsu Fukotaiko, good day. I heard Nimue say as she bowed to whatever person was behind Luska Teiko. Katetsu? Did the 4th Division change vice captains while I was out? I wondered. Up stepped a tall, silver-haired woman through the crowd. Oh, Lamperouge-san, you're awake. The tall woman stated. Yes. I nodded. I believe this is the first time we've met, Miss Isane, Katetsu Isane. She replied. I'm the new vice captain of the 4th Division since last month. Yamada-senpai, my predecessor, broke into a fit of insanity and was incarcerated. I always thought Yamada Fukotaiko had a good head on his shoulders. What happened? I asked, hoping someone would answer. Apparently the guy just couldn't take it anymore. Otomaka Fukotaiko responded. One day he just jumped out of the office window, tearing off his shiakusho, and ran out into the Siraidai wearing nothing but his loincloth. No one knows what caused it or why he did it, but he's been in a fragile state of mind. Central 46 determined him to be unfit to work. Mayuri-sama and I analyzed him. Nimue picked up the story. We determined that the cause of his mania was the release of so much repressed stress. He would not be recovering anytime soon, so he was discharged and released back to his family. Yamada-senpai's younger brother, Hanataro, entered the academy just last year. Katetsu Fukutaiko stated. Taiko is hoping he'll follow in his brother's footsteps and join our squad. Sounds like a lot of interesting things happened while I was out. I said. You could say that again. Uloman-senpai sighed. I got demoted. Madarame beat me and now I'm back to 4th seat. She sighed. And to make things worse, we have a little kid for a vice captain. Ranjika rubbed her friend's back. Oh, it's going to be alright, Shisato, don't let it get you down, these things happen. But I worked so hard to get to 3rd seat. Uloman-senpai whined in anguish. Ah, I don't mean to be rude, but now that the patient has awoken I must do an evaluation. I'm afraid I must ask you all to vacate the room to allow me to work. Katetsu Fukutaiko said timidly. Well then, I suppose we should go get that idiot Omada out of physical therapy, see if he's recovered. Otomaka Fukutaiko stated. Wait, I thought Omada Marinoshin was discharged and drained of spirit energy after he was let out of the maggot's nest for good behavior. I asked. Yeah, but it's his son that Kendra and I are getting out of the medical bay. I cannot understand, for the life of me, why that guy decided upon joining our squad. His skill is seriously lacking, but the house practically begged Central 46 to force us to take him. I made him a 14th seed just get the family off our backs. Luska Taiko seemed displeased with the next generation of the Omadas. Bye senpai. Naomi waved as she left. Well, that paperwork isn't going to get itself done, let's go Ranjiku, Vera. Ishine Taiko told her. See you later, Lelich. Ranjiku bade goodbye to me. Vera stared at me for a while. Before she left, she opened her mouth and spoke to me. Bye. She said and left. I suppose we should be leaving as well. Byakuya Fukutaiko spoke to Hisuna and Susanna. Right, we'll see you later, Lelich. Hisuna told me. Please get better soon. Susanna requested as she left. Well, I guess I'll get out of your way then. If you want to talk to someone later, Lelich, I'll be just outside the hall. I'm in no hurry to get back to my division. Bunch of meatheads. At least one good thing about Zaraki Taiko is that he's not very high on work ethics, so not a lot of paperwork has been heading our way recently. I think my subordinate, Ayasukawa Yumichika, is really the only one who really gives anything about paperwork. I watched Uloman-senpai walk out. The same goes for me. Kyukaku said. I'm not under Gotei jurisdiction, so I can go where I please. I'll be out in the hall. Ah, no smoking in the medical wing. Katetsu Fukutaiko told Kyukaku. Kyukaku gave her a glare. Ah, never mind. I will be returning to my duties now, Lelich-sama. Nimue bowed to me and left. With everyone cleared out, Katetsu Fukutaiko took a deep breath before she spoke to me. So, do you feel well enough to walk, Lamperouge-san? She asked me. I nodded and swiveled my legs so that they hung out over the side of the bed. I stood up on my feet. I should be fine, but I might need some support. Ah, yes. Katetsu Fukutaiko stood next to me and guided me down the hall to an examination room. I sat on a cold table. I hate health exams. I thought to myself. Ah, you need to take off your robes. Katetsu Fukutaiko told me. I removed my robes, leaving myself in my hakama, and saw the triple set of bandages wrapped around my shoulders and the center of my chest. Dried blood coated the bandages. I took a look at my body. I had certainly toned up since my time being alive. Sure, I didn't have massive pectoral muscles or hardened abs, but I was in much better physical shape than when I first took my entrance exam to the Shino Academy. Right, IIILL, examine you. Katetsu Fukutaiko sounded incredibly nervous. I turned to see her staggering towards me with a reddened face that matched Susanna's eyes. She put the stethoscope to my back. I sucked in a deep breath. That thing was cold. Deep breath. I took a deep breath. Katetsufa Kotaiko had me repeat the process a few more times. Alright, IILL, change your bandages. My wounds had started to scab over for the most part. Healing Kido was really amazing. Wounds like the ones I had suffered would take years to heal, or perhaps regenerate improperly, but with Healing Kido such wounds were easily treated as if they were mere paper cuts. While Katetsufa Kotaiko changed my bandages, I decided to start up some small talk. So what's it like working under the fabled Anohana Teiko? I like Anohana Teiko. Katetsufa Kotaiko responded with a big smile on her face. Poor, naive girl. I thought to myself. She's very nice and always looking out for me. People say she's scary, but I've never had a problem with her. Katetsufa Kotaiko responded. Maybe because you haven't done anything to upset her yet. I thought to myself. As Katetsufa Kotaiko rewrapped my right shoulder bandage, she said. I was overseeing your treatment even before Yamada-senpai had his mania attack. I thought Teiko was going to swap me out for my replacement, but she recited an old proverb saying how it's not a good idea to change horses midstream. You sound relieved. I said. Katetsufa Kotaiko dropped the roll of bandages. I'll get that. She bent down to pick it up. At the angle I was sitting I could see right down her robe. Lelich. Iin Tamashi scolded. What? There's no harm in looking. I used to take glances at Millie when she wasn't aware of it all the time, and Colin, Shirley, and C.C too. Iin Tamashi sighed at my statement. I could practically see her rolling her eyes. Katetsufa Kotaiko stood up and began re-rolling the bandages. She started muttering to herself. Let's see, over and under and over and under. She repeated the mantra as she rolled up the bandage tape roll. She finally rolled it up and began dressing my shoulder again. So how long will I be out of commission for? I asked. Well, you won't need as many layers as you did when I first applied your bandages. Your shoulders will still be sore for the next month or so, but you should be fit enough to work if you rest for a week and keep the strenuous activity to a minimum. Katetsufa Kotaiko told me. What qualifies as strenuous activity per se? I asked. Well, swinging your Zanpakuto around for one. Anything that would aggravate the ball and socket joints in your shoulders qualifies really. Katetsufa Kotaiko responded. Which means I'll have to cool it on the Kido training. Wonderful. I thought to myself. I don't understand why so many officers are so eager to return to work. Katetsufa Kotaiko responded. I know 4th Division gets a bad view, especially from the 11th Division, but we do our best to make sure our patients make speedy recoveries. Katetsufa Kotaiko walked around the table to dress my other shoulder. Well, I for one have important business I need to take care of. I told Katetsufa Kotaiko. I don't know about the others. Well, Teiko doesn't like it when people overexert themselves when they should spend time resting. It would really be good if you spent the whole week here recovering rather than going back to your division, many officers do. Katetsufa Kotaiko told me. Well, I've never gone against the advice of a medical professional before, I stated. I'm not about to start. That's good. Katetsufa Kotaiko dropped the bandage roll again. Oops, let me get that. What's with her? I asked myself. Clueless. Iin Tamashi hummed. Oh, you have got to be kidding me? That again? How many women am I going to attract? Katetsufa Kotaiko picked up the bandages again and re-rolled them. She finished dressing my shoulder and then went to work on the wound on my chest. She used a surgical scissor to cut the bandages rather than unravel them since my shoulder bandages overlapped onto them. I could see Katetsufa Kotaiko's flushed cheeks as she towered over me. However, that wasn't my biggest focus considering Katetsufa Kotaiko's height put her chest at my eye level, and rather than crouching she was doing her best to simply lean forward to dress my wounds. I had no idea if she was doing this on purpose or not. You've certainly grown in well, I said as a compliment. Katetsufa Kotaiko froze and dropped the bandages again. I'll get that. I volunteered. No, I'm the medical professional, I'll get it. She responded, but by that point I was already crouching down to get it. My purple eyes met her gray ones. Katetsufa Kotaiko turned such a deep shade of red that it wouldn't be a very outlandish theory to be mistaken that she just invented a 257th color on the spectrum of visible light. She withdrew away from me and went over to the sink and began splashing cold water on her face. I spent that time rolling up the bandages. If she's so attracted to me, how did she dress me so well the first time? I wondered. It's easier to deal with one's crush when they're in comatose, I would suspect. Iin Tamashi responded. Why? I asked. Iin Tamashi made a noise indicated she didn't have a reason for suggesting what she did. I handed the bandages back to Katetsufa Kotaiko after she dried her hands and face and then dressed my wounds. I think that will be all. Katetsufa Kotaiko stammered. You can put your robe back on. I redressed myself and then Katetsufa Kotaiko led me back to my room. I lay back down on my bed and took a deep relaxing breath. So, would I just lay here all week? I asked. You're allowed to walk around the grounds, but I would have to accompany you. I looked at her wondering if she was saying that professionally or if she just wanted to hang around me. It's procedure, she said. Well, all right. I wasn't about to argue, wasn't worth it. Having Katetsufa Kotaiko for a nurse was actually kind of enticing after I let the idea sink in. So do I get a bell or a pager or something in case I need anything? I joked. Yes. Katetsufa Kotaiko went and got something out of one of the cabinets on the other side of the room. She was holding a buzzer in her hand and fumbling with it. I'm always unsure how to calibrate these things properly, she said solemnly. Let me take a look at it. I used to be part of the 12th Division. I requested. Sure. Katetsufa Kotaiko handed it to me. I opened the back of the device. So, what do I set this to in order to ring your soul pager? I asked. My page code is 773. Katetsufa Kotaiko stated. I calibrated the settings to function as such before closing the back. Let's see if this works then, I said and hit the button. Katetsufa Kotaiko's hakama began to vibrate. She pulled out her soul pager. It works, she stated. Good, then there's nothing to worry about, I said and turned over to go to sleep. Wait, you'll put pressure on your shoulder like that. Katetsufa Kotaiko turned me over back onto my back. She and I were inches from each other again. She turned red with embarrassment. She backed away like a skittish cat. Do you want me to get you some medicine to help you sleep? She asked. No thank you, adjusting the angle of the bed and bringing me a new pillow would be very helpful though, I told her. Alright. I'll be right back with a pillow. Don't move and don't go anywhere. Katetsufa Kotaiko left and came back with a new pillow and adjusted the angle of descent of the upper half of my bed until I admitted to being at maximum comfort. Sane. The voice I heard was one voice I knew I would hear from being here, but was hoping to avoid. Taeko. Sane was beaming. How are you? I'm fine. I heard Lamperouge-san had woken up. I sat up. Yes, Katetsufa Kotaiko has been taking good care of me. I'm glad to hear that. Anohana smiled, but it was a pleasant smile. She's been trying hard to adjust to her new position. Her smile turned into that infamous smile of hers. I trust that you won't make things difficult for her, yes. And no, of course not, Anohana Taeko, I said and pressed my back flat against the bed. That's good then. Carry on then, Sane. Anohana Taeko told her. Hi, Taeko. Katetsufa Kotaiko responded. After Anohana Taeko was long gone, Katetsufa Kotaiko sat down on the stool in the room. She turned around to face me. Lamperouge-san, I didn't want to say anything in front of Taeko, but, you don't need to refer to me so formally. She smiled kindly at me, her cheeks were slightly flushed. I'm your nurse, before I'm the Fukotaiko. And I would, like to be friends, she stated. I smiled at her. Friends? But we've only just met. I know, she panicked, but, I've been taking care of you all this time and I'll continue to do so throughout the week, so, I just thought. It's okay, I responded. Yes, it's perfectly fine, after all, everyone who showed up today. They are my friends, or what the Japanese would call nakama. I remembered the test that Iin Tamashi had given me. Now I really understand why I didn't want to give this life up. I have friends, actual friends, who trust me. Yes, you do. Iin Tamashi told me. I'm glad. Kotetsu Fukotaiko responded, drawing me from my thoughts. You seem like you would be a good friend. I feel warm and fuzzy inside. I thought to myself. So, I scratched the side of my head with my index finger. Since you don't want me to call you Kotetsu Fukotaiko anymore, what about Kotetsu Senpai? That feels even more formal. She responded. Isane-chan. I asked with a smirk. That's so informal. I laughed. Sorry, Kotetsu-san works just fine for me if it does for you. I said. Okay. Isane responded. I should probably get some rest. I stated and closed my eyes. Sleep well. Kotetsu-san told me. I grunted in acknowledgement and went to sleep. Chapter 24 End. Chapter 25, Lelouch takes a seat on the sideline. Third-person POV. Sayuri Hisuna had always been a dutiful and loyal Soul Reaper. She constantly walked with her held high and never took crap from anyone she didn't have to. A certain, yet-to-be-born, orange-haired Soul Reaper would find Hisuna's sister to be very similar. Rukia. Hisuna sighed. Hisuna's greatest, perhaps her only regret, was abandoning Rukia out in Inzuri. She had ventured out into that district so many times over the last 50 years, but strangely never found Rukia once. In the last 10 years she heard sightings from friends she had made in the slums as a result of her frequent visits. Rukia had gotten in with a little misfit gang from the sound of it and was fighting for her survival. However, Hisuna wanted to take Rukia away from that need to survive. She'd drag her sister to the Siridi kicking and screaming if she had to. Hisuna never went to Inzuri in her Shiakusho, at least the times when she wasn't in Aizen's division, no time to change. She would always change into royal purple garments, clean versions of the rags she had worn when she used to live in Inzuri. She always frizzed her hair to make her stand out less amongst the foul-smelling and poorly dressed members of the Rokanga. As the fifth seat made her way to Inzuri, she couldn't help but feel as if she was being followed. She couldn't sense any riot so close behind her, but she couldn't help the nagging feeling tugging at the corner of her mind that someone was tailing her. Something wrong, Hisuna? Her Zanpakuto asked her. It's nothing. Hisuna lied and used Shunpo to decrease her travel time to Inzuri. She ducked into the closest saloon and sat down at the bar. She cleared her throat to get the bartender's attention. He turned around. Hisuna, how are you? What can I get you? The bartender, a short, bald man with a wide girth and a large chin, had been Hisuna's prime source of information for as long as the black-haired Soul Reaper could remember. Just the usual. Hisuna responded as she put 15 gon on the table. As the bartender poured her drink, he said, Sorry to say I got nothing new to tell you since the last time you were here. Hisuna sighed in disappointment and just decided to sit and have her drink. She had come all the way out here so she might as well have her drink and go. As she was drinking her beverage, a drinking glass, full of sake, sailed towards her. Without turning around, Hisuna swatted it away and it shattered on the wall nearby. She was used to things like this in the Inzuri bars. As she took another sip of her Black Russian, a burly, dark-skinned man, with full mustache and beard, sat next to her. Hisuna expected the usual crummy pickup line, but this experience was different. Hey, I couldn't help but notice how much of a resemblance you have to this other gal I saw wandering the streets the other day. The man said to her. Hisuna nearly choked and began to cough. She coughed again, you saw my sister. Oh, so there's the resemblance. You looking for her? The man asked her. For the last 50 years. Where did you see her? Hisuna asked. Just how much is that information worth to you? The man asked her with a toothy grin. His teeth were all yellow from lack of proper brushing. I'll pay anything you want. Hisuna stated. I was thinking of something other than money. The man ran a hand up Hisona's upper leg. No way. She swatted the man's hand away. No information is worth that. Oh, but your sister hasn't seen you in 50 years, surely you'd do anything to find her. The man goaded. No means no, now get lost. Surely 500 gon is much more valuable than an evening with me. Hisona stated. Nope, sorry. The man answered. A pity. Hisona got up and began to get up, but the man put a hand on her shoulder. Hey, don't be like that, sweetheart. We've only just met. The man told her. Get your hands off me. Hisona exclaimed, pushing the man's hand off her shoulder. And don't call me sweetheart. Do you have any idea who you're messing with? The man grumbled. Do you have any idea who you're messing with? Hisona turned back at the man, not the least bit afraid, considering her status. The patron couldn't take Hisona's haughty attitude and took a swing at her. Hisona stopped his massive fist with her palm and then pushed lightly, well, what for her was lightly, with force, and sent the man careening into the wall where the drinking glass had shattered earlier. Sighing in frustration, Hisona got up and turned to leave, only to see a bunch of patrons snarling their teeth and looking to inflict bodily harm upon her. A gang leader. Hisona realized the type of man she had beaten down. Could have seen that coming. She stepped off the platform to the open bar and put a hand on her sword. You know, boys, she said. This sword isn't just for show. She drew it out and held it out in front of her. Sing. Little whirlwinds began to form around Hisona's sword, Kaze no Iriko. Colored voice of the wind, Hisona swung her sword out at her side as it transformed into a long, black leather whip. It was a little over 3 meters in length. She whapped a few of her attackers, but they didn't stay down for long. On her next assault, Hisona's whip was grabbed by one of her attackers. Using her battle-toned strength, Hisona pulled the thug towards her like a fish caught on a line and then blasted him in the face with Sakasui. Hisona knew these jokers were no match for her. She could easily take them out with her Hakuta skill if they weren't in a large group. Maintaining her distance was essential. If she was caught off guard, she'd be grappled by her attacker's large arms, held down and gang-raped for sure. To avoid that, she was using her trusted partner to keep her safe. Hisona let loose her whip again, knocking down her attackers, and then retracted the weapon back to her and gripped a segment between her hands, pulling it taut so that it made a snapping noise. Some no Yuta. The first song, Hisona pulled back on her whip and lashed it at the ground. Midori Menuetto. Green Minuet. As she whapped the ground, a small tornado rose up from the ground and spiraled out in a controlled motion by Hisona's free hand as if she were the conductor of an orchestra. She gathered up all of her attackers and directed her tornado outside the pub, where she scattered the bodies. The men fell to the ground in pain, groaning. Hisona sighed and sealed her sword before pulling out her change purse from her pocket and pulled out 250 gon and placing it on the bar table. I think this should cover the damage. Hisona then headed for the door. A cloaked figure had bared witness to the events occurring inside the bar, and as Hisona walked out, ducked around the side of the building to avoid being seen. He followed her with his eyes before watching her head towards the village limits. He then sauntered after her, tracing her Ryotsu in order to not lose her. The cloaked person was in no rush to reveal himself to Hisona. He'd play a little more reconnaissance and wait for her to be alone. Then he would make his move. Hisona, after leaving the village, unable to sense the cloaked figure, unaware of his presence, but still assured that someone was following her, made her way to a clearing in the woods. She stopped and unsheathed her Zanpakuto again. Sing, Kaze no Iriko. Hisona unleashed her long black whip again. I think we're far away. Right here is fine. She spoke aloud. Green spirit energy gathered in her whip before seeping out into the open air a small distance from Hisona's standing point. A figure materialized. It was a woman with long navy blue hair and pointy, elf-like ears. She was wearing long green parachute pants with white pinstripes and a grape-purple, sleeveless shirt that hugged tightly to her skin, which was rather tan in complexion. The woman also had 2 large, raven-colored wings on her back and wore 2 yellow bracelets on each of her wrists. Her fingernails each were of a different color. Her pinky was green, her ring finger was red, her middle finger was blue, her index finger was orange, and her thumb was lavender. The figure also had 2 pea green irises. The figure was the manifestation of Hisana's Zanpakuto, Kaze no Irako. Yes, you're right. This area is sufficient to continue where we last left off. The winged spirit noted. She pointed over Hisana's shoulder. However, you have company. Hisana turned to see a cloaked figure walk into the area. You know there are areas closer to the Siridi to practice Bankai training. The figure pulled down their hood and opened up their cloak to reveal one, Lelich 6 Britannia, but was known to the Soul Society as Lamperouge Lelich. Lelich? What are you doing here? Hisana asked. I could ask you the same thing. Lelich responded. Your direct subordinate, Karasu-senpai, said you were out. Unfortunately for you, not only do I have some paperwork for you to sign back at the division, but I've also been curious about your little trips to Inzuri for the longest time. I also didn't know you were even working to master Bankai, Hisana. You sure keep a lot of secrets from the division. The irony of Lelich's statement was lost on Hisana. As far as anyone in the Godai knew, Lelich had nothing to hide. It had been 2 years since Lelich's killing of Ichino's Maki. As he had figured, the new captain, Zaraki Kenpeke, suggested to Kuka Kijinrei to give Lelich a higher seat in accreditation for having defeated a higher-ranked officer. Lelich was subsequently promoted to 7th seat a little over 2 months after he was discharged from 4th Division. So you stalked me, while using a Ryotsu concealing cloak, all the way out here. Hisana was rather ticked off with her former teacher. Well, I didn't follow you so closely, I just tracked your Ryotsu. By the time I caught up with you, the first thing I witnessed going on in that bar was you sending that big guy flying. What's all the way out here that you would discard your uniform? Does Byakuya Fukutaiko even know about these trips of yours? You wouldn't understand, Lelich, and the only one who knows is Yuka Taiko. Hisana said. I made him promise not to tell anyone else, but he wouldn't let me come out here, unattended, unless he knew. So why can't I know? Lelich inquired. Like I said, you wouldn't understand. Hisana repeated. Try me. Lelich said as he shouldered his Ryotsu concealing cloak. Go on, Hisana, Lelich's is a friend of yours, isn't he? Why is it so hard to tell people? Are you that regretful of what you've done? Kaze no Irako asked her. You may as well tell me, and Byakuya Fukutaiko too. Your significant other doesn't deserve to have secrets kept from him, especially something like this. Without knowing all the details, do you know what he might speculate if he knew you were constantly going all the way out here? Lelich asked Hisana. Okay. Hisana exclaimed in anguish. There was a pause as both Hisana's Zanpakuto and Lelich looked at her for a moment, waiting for a continuation. Hisana sighed and then told her story. When I first came to the Soul Society, I didn't arrive alone. I came here with my younger sister, Rukia. However, Inzuri is a very unforgiving place and I was eventually left with a choice. I could continue this life of hardship and raise my infantile sister, or I could leave her behind and survive. Hisana began to tear up. So many souls arrive in the Soul Society every day, separated from their family. I didn't realize at the time how fortunate I was to have Rukia with me, and I selfishly cast her aside, leaving her crying in an alleyway. You don't realize what you have until it's gone. Lelich recited the old, cliché proverb. I became a soul reaper, with every intention of getting strong so that I could defend myself. It was when I learned that becoming a soul reaper was a one-way deal that I felt ashamed of myself. Rather than show my shame, I hid it and trained to better myself. You, as my teacher, recognized my talent and helped me become strong, and Byakuya Dano became the closest friend I have. Every day when I got up at the academy, I felt comfort in knowing that I could always look forward to your teaching expertise and Byakuya Dano's kindness. After graduation, we were both accepted into the 13th Division, as you probably no doubt know. I succeeded in sneaking out of the Siridi a few times while I was there until Yuka Taiko caught wind of my actions. He said he observed 2 of my comings and goings in and out of the Siridi and wanted to know what was constantly sending me out there. Why did you tell him? Lelich asked. He's my captain and he was questioning me, I just felt obligated, I guess. Yuka Taiko was incredibly understanding of my situation. He was the only one who knew until I began telling all of this to you. Hisana said to her friend. Why go out there? You left Rukia crying in an alleyway. Don't you think the chances of her being alive were slim? Lelich asked. If she was dead then I wanted proof of such, but no proof was to be found. I kept going back, clinging to the hope that she was still alive. And then, one day, about 18 years ago, an old woman at a clothing store accidentally called me Rukia by mistake. Hisana brought a clenched hand up to her chin and squeezed her eyes shut. She apologized, realizing I was much taller than my sister, and a Soul Reaper to boot, since I was in Aizen Teiko's squad at the time and never took the time to change out of my Shiakusho when I would visit during that era. I remember running over to the woman asking about Rukia. She said she didn't know where the little girl came from, but she just came by every now and then and helped the woman wash clothes in exchange for something to eat. Tears fell from Hisana's face. I was so happy. Rukia was alive, now all I had to do was find her. And you've continued to search for her ever since. Does that about sum it up? Lelich asked. Hisana nodded and opened her eyes, tears continued to fall from her face, increasing in rate. I have to find her. I want to apologize to her. I'd make her understand, even if she never forgives me, I just want her to know that I love her. Well, I can certainly relate. Lelich answered. I would go to any lengths for my younger sister too. You have a younger sister? Hisana was confused. She thought Lelich was a loner. My sister is still alive, in the world of the living. Lelich responded. Do you miss her? Hisana asked. Every single day. Lelich replied. Do you want my help to look for her? Would you? Hisana asked. I have my own information network I can tap into. Lelich stated. Hisana felt moved. Lelich didn't have to do anything. She had expected him to call her some form of derogatory term for abandoning her sister, but he was completely sympathetic, almost as if he understood exactly what she was going through. He was even offering to help her. Hisana was overcome with emotion and hugged Lelich in gratitude, sobbing. She was so grateful for his kindness. Lelich soothed her as she cried. It was easy for him to place himself in Hisana's position. Given the course of events when he was alive, becoming Zero was sort of like abandoning Nunnally, but he did everything he could for her sake, just as Lelich knew that Hisana became a Soul Reaper so she could one day tell Rukia all about as if it were a family anecdote. Lelich knew that, if he had succeeded at the Black Rebellion and continued until his original plan had succeeded, that he would have revealed himself to Nunnally and told her everything. I have to find her. Hisana sobbed as she grabbed at her friend's robe. I know. Lelich soothed his former student turned superior. I know. 6th Division. Lelich kept his promise and asked Kyokaku to please look into locating Hisana's sister. Since the matter wasn't too covered, he spoke to her in person and discussed things with her right out in the open. You just leave it to me, kid. Kyokaku told him. It had been approximately 1 year since Lelich had found out about Hisana's secret. Currently he was busy in his office checking over some reports from routine missions he had authorized. Hisana was doing the same. The sun was starting to set and the 5th seat was just about finished with all her paperwork. As she gathered the papers in a nice neat pile, she went to make her rounds to deliver the papers to their proper recipients. She started with Byakuya. 2 months after Lelich learned about Hisana's sister, the 5th seat confessed to Byakuya about Rukia. Hisana expected Byakuya to, as she did with Lelich, insult her for abandoning her sister, but Byakuya was just about as sympathetic as Lelich had been. His only concern was why she didn't tell him sooner. I was scared that you might reject me. What I did was horrible. Hisana had told her crush. It is not my place to judge your actions. I was not in Inzuri, so I don't know how dire the situation was. Human beings are very fickle in that we do everything to preserve our own lives when pushed to certain limits. If I am going to judge any of your actions, then I will confess that I am disappointed in you. And I am disappointed only in that you didn't tell me sooner. Byakuya had responded. Hisana gave him a hug and a peck on his cheek for that one. As she approached the office, she could hear discussion going on behind the door. So that's it then. Byakuya said to the person he had been talking to. Yes, they're not fond of it, and I had to step on a few toes, but they've stopped being so darn obstinate about the whole thing. There's still plenty of resentment, but at least they're not shouting their heads off like a bunch of battle-crazed 11th Division officers. It was Jinrei whom Byakuya had been talking to. Arigato, Ji-san. Byakuya thanked his grandfather. There was a long pause. Am I ready? Byakuya asked. Ah, Byakuya, Jinrei replied, the only man who can answer that is you. You have my support, but that alone does not make a leader. A leader is judged by his actions and his words, as well as the actions his words beget. I understand. Byakuya responded. Well then, I'm going to go tidy up in my office and go back to the manor. You do what you have to do. Byakuya's grandfather spoke to him. Footsteps approached the door and Jinrei nearly opened the door right into Hisuna's face. Oh. Sorry, Sayuri-san, I didn't see you there. He apologized to Hisuna. And no, the error is on my part, Taiko. Hisuna bowed in reply. Jinrei acknowledged her statement and then walked away. Hisuna knocked on the inside of the door to announce her presence. Byakuya looked up from his desk. Oh, Hisuna, come in. He told her. I have paperwork for you. Hisuna told him as she placed it on the desk. Sorry if you thought you were almost done. Byakuya looked at the dates marked at the top. If I get up bright and early tomorrow I can finish this before it's due. A lack of sleep is worth it in this case. I'll handle it tomorrow morning. He rose to his feet. Hisuna, would you take a walk with me? He asked. Ah, sure. She responded. Follow me. Byakuya brushed past Hisuna and the two walked together. Byakuya made Hisuna follow him until both were on a walkway that stood high above the 6th Division grounds. Both could easily see the sun setting from their location. Will you watch the sunset with me? Byakuya asked Hisuna. Sure. Hisuna answered. They didn't wait long, most of the setting had taken place during their walk. When the stars came out and the moon appeared overhead, Byakuya spoke again. Hisuna. He called her name again. She looked at him as he spoke. There is a reason I called you out here. We've been friends for more than 50 years. Some have speculated more than that, but I've never had the freedom to confirm or deny such things. I'd like to put an end to that speculation permanently. I also now know about your sister and how much finding her means to you, and I don't want you to share that burden alone. Byakuya took a deep breath and pulled out a small jewelry box from his hakama as he got down on one knee. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, Sayuri Hisuna. He opened the box in front of her, revealing a platinum ring with a sakura blossom-shaped, rose-colored, diamond jewel in the center. Will you marry me? Hisuna gave Byakuya a deer-in-headlights look. She had often fantasized about this moment, but never did she think it would actually happen. Many happy memories of her and Byakuya over the last 56 years flooded through her mind. She had known the man before her since before either of them hit puberty. She was overcome with emotion, completely speechless. She knew Byakuya cared about her a great deal, but to actually decide to marry her, not a noble, not a friend of the family, not anyone else. He wanted to marry her. I don't know what to say. She managed to get out she was starting to tear up, touched by Byakuya's proposal. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Just accept it. Byakuya said to her. He was hoping she would at least agree to marry her. If she didn't, it would make all his work for the last decade almost entirely pointless. He loved her, he knew he did. He wouldn't have gone to great lengths to make this moment possible otherwise. Hisuna threw herself at Byakuya and wrapped her arms around his neck. Small sobs could be heard escaping her lips. Why are you crying? Byakuya asked his potential betrothed. I'm just so happy. Hisuna wept. I always hoped this moment would come. I accept. Of course I accept. I love you, Byakuya-sama. She cried out. With the closeness she now was with her longtime friend, Hisuna felt comfortable with the change in honorific. Byakuya got up off his knee and put the ring on Hisuna's finger. He looked at her tear-stained, violet eyes as she looked up at his gray ones. He leaned down and kissed Hisuna's soft lips. Hisuna opened her mouth, reached up and placed her hand on the back of Byakuya's neck. The two shared a loving kiss. It was their first between them throughout the entire time they had known each other. Neither of them noticed a figure standing atop a rooftop at an even higher altitude, wearing a Ryotsu concealing cape as it fluttered in the nightly breeze. Lelouch smiled down at the couple. He had given Byakuya the suggestion of waiting until nightfall to props to Hisuna. The genius Soul Reaper had spent the last couple of months reading guidebooks to romance, and a couple of novels ever since he found out from his vice-captain that Jinrei was close to putting down the flames of justified defiance of the union between the man and woman Lelouch was observing from a higher altitude and considerable distance with a pair of binoculars. He left his perch content with the fact that at least someone in this slightly twisted and corrupted world could find their happily ever after. Chapter 25 End. Check the description for the links to the author.